Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Shadow Was More Tech-Focused? Terra Ace wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. The world outside Minoru Kageno's small bedroom window was dim, the streets illuminated only by the sickly glow of a few aging streetlights and the distant neon signs that never fully slept. On nights like this, the crumbling asphalt and chipped paint of suburban apartment blocks took on a surreal, muted quality. Occasionally, a car passed with headlights slicing through the dark, or a lone cyclist pedaled by, head down, barely acknowledging the sleeping neighborhood. Inside Minoru's cramped room, a different world crackled to life, a domain of tangled wires, half-assembled circuit boards, and an array of monitors casting a ghostly blue-white luminescence over everything. The hum of cooling fans served as a steady lullaby, a counterpoint to the distant sirens and muffled chatter drifting in from outside. It smelled faintly of solder and warm plastic. Stacks of printouts covered in Minoru's neat handwriting and cryptic diagrams lay scattered across the desk and floor. In the corner, a bookshelf bowed under the weight of reference manuals, programming guides, and obscure treatises on cryptography and infiltration techniques. While his classmates spent their evenings battling virtual monsters or grinding through cram school sessions, Minoru was here, huddled over his workbench. Tonight, he tinkered with his latest creation, a sleek, palm-sized drone whose chassis was a composite of lightweight polymers and clever 3D printed components. He had fitted it with night vision optics, precision rotors for silent flight, and an improvised acoustic dampener that would mask its mechanical whir. Leaning back, Minoru took in the scene, eyes gleaming with private ambition. In ordinary daylight and in the corridors of his high school, he passed without remark. Black hair always neatly trimmed but unexceptional, an average frame clothed in a regulation uniform, and a posture that radiated quiet acquiescence. Classmates might have recognized his face but never his name. He orchestrated this anonymity with careful intent, each subtlety calibrated like a piece of code. Why stand out now when he aimed for something far greater? Deep within him seethed a desire not for the spotlight, but for the hidden control panels that dictated the stage directions of life. He dreamed not of heroism or villainy in the traditional sense, but of becoming what he called the Eminence in shadow, a figure neither celebrated nor condemned by the public, but one who controlled the world's currents from behind the scenes. Power isn't just about flashy swords and martial arts, he murmured as he guided his soldering iron with surgeon-like precision. A delicate wire fused into place under his watchful eye, and he allowed himself a small nod of approval. It's about control, information, tools, and most importantly, shadows. For years, ever since he was a child huddled over contraptions while other kids chased soccer balls, this belief had grown in him like a vine. He had devoured books on hacking, studied engineering blueprints borrowed from online forums, and pored over case studies of legendary whistleblowers and anonymous activists. From infiltration tactics to the subtle art of surveillance, he consumed knowledge as if preparing for a grand, unseen conflict. His current project, the drone he dubbed Umbra-01, was merely a stepping stone, a test of his growing arsenal of skills. Tonight's mission was a modest one: to infiltrate the school after hours and plant a listening device in the faculty office. A childish prank to some, but to Minoru, it was a carefully measured exercise in stealth and data acquisition. It was training for the day he would infiltrate the offices of corrupt bureaucrats, or break into our labs of multinational corporations, all without ever revealing his face. The thought of those future exploits thrilled him more than any teenage romance or varsity trophy ever could. At last, the drone was ready for a test flight. He placed Umbra-01 on his desk, its matte black casing reflecting the dancing lines of code on his monitors. He tapped a command on his keyboard and the drone's rotors engaged with a soft whisper, causing the tiny machine to hover steadily just above the cluttered surface. Minoru's lips curled into a grin. Another step closer to be the Eminence, he murmured, voice full of quiet satisfaction. The following day, Minoru's outward appearance reverted seamlessly to the persona he had perfected. He walked through the school gates with a slight slump to his shoulders, his gaze grazing the floor tiles more often than the faces of his classmates. In the classroom, he took his usual seat at the back corner, next to the window but never attracting the eye. He wrote in his notebook, though mostly nonsense, a list of encryption keys hidden between doodles, random data sets camouflaged as math notes. His classmates saw only a quiet, unremarkable boy, as easily ignored as a piece of old furniture. Only one person seemed to look at him more than casually, Akane Nishita, or was that her name? Minoru had noted her once, a girl with an unusually sharp gaze and a perceptible curiosity that seemed out of place in this world of bland routine. She occasionally glanced his way, eyes narrowing as if to peel back his layers. Minoru always feigned ignorance, blending further into mediocrity. As he lowered his head to feign listlessness, he caught the tail end of a cold stare from her direction. He let it roll off him like water off a slick surface, ignoring it and maintaining his meek facade. Let her think what she liked. He'd remain a ghost in these halls, a footnote in school gossip, until he chose otherwise. During the lunch break, the cacophony of voices and clattering trays faded as Minoru retreated to the most secluded corner of the library, a musty alcove lined with dusty encyclopedias no one ever read. Here, silence reigned. It was a sanctuary where he could feed his mind with data. Before his eyes danced the remnants of a news report he'd skimmed over breakfast, a series of sophisticated break-ins at local tech firms. Advanced AI prototypes, still in their testing phases, had vanished without a trace. The police, befuddled and outclassed, offered only generic statements. The city buzzed with rumors and speculation ran wild. Amateurs, Minoru scoffed silently, resting his chin on his knuckles. If he designed those security systems, the thieves would have never gained entry. And if he had been the thief? They'd have found nothing but confusion and unanswered questions. To him it was child's play. The seeds of an idea took root in his mind, branching out into a vision of manipulation. What if he could orchestrate such incidents himself, carefully controlling both the crime and the narrative around it? He could build a legend, a whispered name in the underbelly of the city's tech world. He could tweak security holes, leak false leads, pit corporations against each other, all from behind a veil of perfect anonymity. Information is power, he reminded himself softly. He pulled out a sleek, lightweight tablet and began sketching plans for a new infiltration program. His stylus danced across the screen, drafting algorithms for a worm that would slip undetected into local security networks. It would nest quietly, harvesting knowledge, relaying vulnerability points back to him. No alarms, no logs left behind, like a shadow passing through darkness. That night, while the city's residents surrendered to sleep, Minoru remained awake and alert, framed by the soft glow of his multi-monitor rig. 4 screens displayed various feeds. One scrolled lines of code, another showed server logs, another was a map of network security devices around the city, and the last projected a live camera view of his desk. The quiet hum of electronics replaced any lullaby, and the faint reflection of code in his eyes made them look almost luminous. "This is it," he said under his breath, cracking his knuckles. He felt a sense of ceremony in the moment. With a keystroke, he unleashed the worm, setting it into the digital veins of the city's systems. Small at first, merely testing the waters, it would grow bolder with each success. Meanwhile, the test run for Umbra 01's true capabilities was about to begin. He guided the drone out of his window and into the night sky. It was almost invisible against the darkness, its infrared sensors and noise-canceling rotors turning it into a phantom. He fed it coordinates to a small tech startup rumored to be developing cutting-edge encryption algorithms. The target building's exterior cameras swept lazily, seeing nothing. Its motion detectors waited for obvious intruders, but none came. Instead, Umbra 01 glided to a rooftop vent, twisting open the cover and slipping inside with a whisper of metal. As Minoru watched the live feed from the drone's camera, the thrill of control coursed through his veins. Each meter Umbra 01 advanced was a demonstration of his skill and daring. It navigated ductwork, avoided thermal sensors, and bypassed digital safeguards with the subtlety of a master thief. Inside, he saw the startup's quiet offices, desks and prototypes left as if the engineers would return in a few hours. By the time they did, Minoru's listening device would be in place, collecting hints of future tech breakthroughs and confidential client lists. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, allowing himself a rare, genuine smile. On his monitors, encrypted feeds and scanning protocols gave way to clear recordings and stolen blueprints. He was, even now, weaving invisible threads of influence. He would grow stronger in secret, learning how to bend the city's networks to his will. These small heists and training exercises would one day scale up to move entire corporations, shift economic tides, and perhaps even topple corrupt regimes. "I will become the unseen hand," he said, voice low with conviction. "The one who watches from the shadows." The Eminence in shadow, powered by technology. Outside, the city's lights continued their silent vigil. No siren sounded, no alarm rang. Inside Minoru's room, only the quiet hum of electronics bore witness to the birth of a new force. one hidden behind darkened windows and a boy's unremarkable face, yet destined to shape the world's fate from the shadows. Later that night, Umbra 01 hovered silently in the cramped ventilation shaft, the confined space forcing its rotors to slow to a near whisper. Dust motes drifted past its lens, barely illuminated by the drone's low-intensity navigation lights. Its micro-rotors, sculpted from advanced composite materials, emitted only the faintest hum, so quiet that it blended seamlessly into the distant hum of the building's HVAC system. On Minoru's monitors, the drone's camera feed displayed every detail in crisp, night vision clarity. The matte finish of ductwork, the shallow scratches on metal surfaces left by maintenance crews, and the color-coded wiring bundles that snaked along the shaft's inner walls. Tiny LED indicators blinked at regular intervals, highlighting network nodes and sensor junctions. For a relatively small tech startup, the office was more fortified than one might expect. An invisible tension suggested deeper secrets lurking beneath its polished corporate veneer. Yet Minoru had anticipated this. He thrived in the space where technology and secrecy intertwined. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes reflecting lines of green code and flickering data overlays. The subtle scent of heated circuitry filled his own workspace, where an array of monitors and custom-built consoles formed his command center. Everything around him hummed with purpose: cooling fans, processors running at the edge of their capacity, encrypted connections flickering in and out of remote servers. Every contingency had been planned. If Umbra 01 signal was detected, Minoru had coded a self-destruct sequence to fry its internal components instantly, leaving nothing but a charred husk and scrambled silicon. He knew failure was not an option, and contingency was his personal art form. Access point 12 meters ahead, he muttered into the silence, a note of calm confidence in his voice. Obstacle, vent cover. On screen, Umbra 01's manipulator arm extended with mechanical precision. The miniature multi-tool at its tip whirred silently, its edges refined to apply just the right torque to each screw. The drone carefully engaged the fasteners one by one, each turn deliberate and soundless. It removed the vent grate without so much as a metallic scrape, sliding it aside with a practiced delicacy that bordered on artistry. Minoru's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. This was going exactly as rehearsed. Perfect, he said quietly, a satisfied smirk tugging at his lips. Now into the den of secrets. The drone dipped through the revealed opening and into the office below. Its camera adjusted seamlessly, compensating for the darkness. This was a nocturnal forest of technology. Rows of desks sprouted with prototypes like strange mechanical flora. The only illumination came from the soft glow of screensaver animations drifting lazily across monitors and the quiet blinking of LED status lights on various devices. PC towers, VR rigs, half-assembled circuit boards, and precision tools formed a bizarre ecosystem of innovation. The air down here smelled faintly of solder, cleaning solvents, and synthetic polymers. Where would I hide something valuable? Minoru thought aloud, tapping his chin lightly. He surveyed the projected map, reading thermal signatures and electromagnetic frequencies. On his screen, the drone's infrared scanner outlined a locked server cabinet tucked in the far corner, its interior cooler than the ambient air, likely due to insulation and shielding. There, he decided, marking the cabinet with a digital waypoint. The server cabinet was no ordinary storage unit. It boasted advanced biometric locks and layers of electromagnetic shielding that would stymie less prepared intruders. Minoru's anticipation grew. Most would give up here. He lived for such challenges. Umbra 01 drifted over silent carpet fibers and artificial flooring, its propulsion carefully modulated to avoid stirring the air. Perching above the cabinet like a mechanical hawk, it deployed a small sensor that scanned the biometric panel. Minoru's customized software kicked in, comparing heat residues, latent oils, and microabrasions left by previous users. The drone's processor ran lines of code that emulated a fingerprint overlay in real time, forging a perfect counterfeit that fooled the sensors. Within moments, the lock's indicators shifted from red to green with a soft, obedient click. Too easy, Minoru whispered, suppressing a chuckle. He felt his pulse pick up, not from fear but from the exhilaration of piercing another layer of secrecy. Every successful step was a testament to his meticulous planning and skill. As Umbra 01 pulled open the cabinet door, it revealed a sleek black device, no larger than a briefcase, featureless yet humming faintly with internal electronics. It bore no brand, no serial number, no external hints of purpose. Minoru's eyes narrowed. He knew significance often hid behind unassuming appearances. An encrypted storage module, he mused, tilting his head as if to peer into its digital heart. I bet it's hiding something juicy. Umbra-01's manipulator arm extended once more, this time producing a data probe with a specialized connector. The drone slid the probe into a subtle port, almost invisible against the device's casing. On Minoru's main screen, strings of encrypted code scrolled rapidly. He watched as his decryption algorithms began their labor, peeling away the first layer of encryption like the skin of an onion. A hint of satisfaction bloomed in his chest. Then a sudden spike flared on his network monitor, a stark red warning line cutting across his comm interface. Unknown device detected, read the alert. Minoru's smirk dissolved instantly. Someone was trying to pinpoint his signal to trace him back to his hidden lair. His fingers flew over the keyboard, activating layers of counter-intrusion measures, VPN rerouting, cipher rotations, dummy traffic, and honeypots that led attackers down digital dead ends. He wove digital illusions at breakneck speed to mask his presence. On the drone's feed, a small red LED on the briefcase-like device began blinking rapidly. A booby trap. The device's creators had expected infiltration and prepared a counter. A challenge within a challenge. They booby-trapped it? Minoru muttered, leaning forward, adrenaline sharpening his focus. Interesting. This is getting fun. The drone, obeying a rapid command, retracted its data probe, halting the incomplete download. Simultaneously, a faint clicking sound echoed through the dark office. Minoru heard it through the drone's sensitive mics. Footsteps, measured and purposeful. He stiffened, scanning the feed. A tall, lean figure entered the office, dressed in dark, practical clothing. No security uniform, no baton, no flashlight. Instead, this intruder carried themselves with quiet confidence, as if they had rehearsed this infiltration long before. Company? Minoru hissed through clenched teeth. He guided Umbra-01 up toward the shadows of a ceiling beam, nestling it behind a cluster of ductwork and cable trays. The drone's camera zoomed in, adjusting focus to track the newcomer's every subtle movement. The figure approached the server cabinet, crouching low to inspect the lock. They pulled out a handheld scanner, emitting a quick pulse of light to probe the interior. Minoru watched their reaction, confusion, alertness. They noticed the tampering, recognized that someone had beaten them here by mere minutes. Then, with a fluidity that belied deep training, they looked upward, directly at the drone's hiding spot. Minoru's heart leapt into his throat. How could they have sensed it? Time to go, he breathed, fingers executing the escape command. Umbra-01 darted back toward the open vent, but the figure moved with inhuman speed, hurling a small object into the air. An EMP grenade, Minoru realized too late. The grenade pulsed blue-white, discharging a wave of crackling energy that wreaked havoc on the drone's delicate systems. The feed on Minoru's monitor vanished into static, and then nothing. Minoru stared at the now blank screen, teeth gritted. He hadn't lost like this in years. Umbra-01's remains would tell no tales, but the device was lost and the data remained locked away. Whoever that figure was, they weren't ordinary muscle or a half-hearted competitor. Their gear, their reaction time, their aura of quiet competence. These were signs of a formidable opponent, one who understood the game intimately. Who was that? Minoru muttered into the hushed darkness of his own command center. He clenched and unclenched his fists, mind racing through possibilities. They had been prepared. Prepared for him. It both angered and excited him. He felt the blood thrum in his temples, but not from defeat. This was the thrill of meeting a worthy adversary, someone who could push him beyond his comfort zone. With a slow exhale, he leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth curling up in a mischievous grin. Looks like the shadows are deeper than I thought, he said, voice steady with renewed determination. This isn't over. If they're playing the game, I'll make sure I'm the one writing the rules. He opened a new project file on his console, labeling it Umbra-02. A new design, improved armor, updated infiltration protocols, enhanced countermeasures. He would upgrade everything. He was already envisioning it. Stronger encryption, more subtle infiltration methods, and counter-EMP shielding. This loss wasn't a dead end, but an invitation. The secretive opponent had acknowledged him. Now he would redouble his efforts, evolve, adapt, and return to claim victory. Let's see who breaks first, he said softly, eyes glittering with a fierce resolve. A new chapter had begun. The game was afoot, and Minoru would settle for nothing less than total mastery. Minoru Kageno leaned back in his chair, allowing the glow of his monitors to bathe his face in shifting green and gold patterns. The lines of code were like living organisms, swarming across his screen as his custom scripts evolved. The recent loss of Umbra-01 stung, but not as a wound. Rather, it was a spark, an ignition of something far more ambitious. Losing the drone had been both failure and opportunity. Now he knew the contours of the battlefield. There were forces out there who played at a higher tier than casual corporate guards or low-rent thieves. Instead of discouraging him, that knowledge set his blood ablaze. They were good, he admitted under his breath, fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, he pictured the mysterious figure who took down his drone, recalling the efficient throw of the EMP grenade and the uncanny ability to sense Umbra-01's presence. But good isn't enough. His voice was calm, resolved. He welcomed the challenge because now he understood the stakes, and how much further he had to push himself. As he cracked his knuckles and resumed typing, lines of code scrolled down his monitor in an elegant dance. The digital environment around him thrummed with potential. Umbra-02 wouldn't just be a machine, it would be the culmination of his lessons learned, a reflection of his growing prowess. If Umbra-01 had been a promising concept, Umbra-02 would be a masterwork, a living, evolving tool that could handle any scenario he threw at it. Minoru's cramped bedroom workshop sprang to life with a new purpose. The desk that once served as a makeshift hangar for Umbra-01 now overflowed with parts scavenged from online marketplaces, underground bazaars, and the occasional unofficial acquisition. Reinforced carbon fiber plates stacked like puzzle pieces, accompanied by microprocessors neatly stored in anti-static bags, high-fidelity optical sensors with fisheye lenses, and coils of advanced wiring made from cutting-edge alloys. Every piece felt like a precious relic, an ingredient in a recipe for something extraordinary. Mobility was the first challenge. Umbra-01 had flown gracefully, but flight alone was a limitation. The world was made of corners and crevices, tunnels and crawl spaces. Umbra-02 would navigate them all. Minoru envisioned a frame that could reconfigure itself. Telescopic legs for climbing, retractable treads for rolling silently through vents, miniature drills or sonic emitters to burrow through soft material if need be. The rotors wouldn't just lift the drone, they'd be powerful enough to support Minoru's own weight briefly, allowing for dramatic escapes or unexpected vantage points. He imagined escaping from a rooftop by clinging to his creation, or hovering outside a high-rise window to plant a listening device. Every scenario he conjured was another reason to enhance the machine's versatility. Adaptive design, Minoru murmured as he sketched a blueprint on his tablet. His stylish traced lines that would become reality. No more predictable movements. I need something that can think on its own. This was where he would push beyond traditional programming. He would integrate a learning AI, a neural network that could analyze data and evolve with each mission. Not a mindless algorithm but a hungry intellect. The AI, codenamed Delta, would be his digital hound. He fed it endless data, surveillance footage from public cameras, recordings of animals hunting in the wild, combat simulations, infiltration tutorials, tactical squad maneuvers from obscure military manuals. He even borrowed from nature documentaries, footage of panthers stalking prey, snakes slithering unseen through underbrush, hawks diving silently from above. The idea was to create a predator's instinct within a digital framework. Delta would internalize these strategies and learn how to adapt them in a high-tech environment. Learn from nature, Minoru said with a grin, tapping a command that fed yet another set of videos into Delta's training set. Predators don't just hunt, they stalk, adapt, and strike with precision. As days passed, the AI's code matured, each iteration shaving microseconds off reaction times, improving pathfinding and refining decision-making protocols. Delta would be housed exclusively in Umbra-02. No external links that could be hacked, no remote server that could betray them. Delta would exist in a fortress of black box encryption inside the drone's core processor, loyal only to Minoru. Of course, defense and infiltration tools were equally important. Umbra-02 would need a micro-EMP device to disable electronics. No one would catch it off guard again without paying a price. It needed grappling hooks for stealthy escapes, powerful aftermarket rotors for lifting or carrying heavy payloads, and an experimental nanite-based self-repair system so that damage sustained in the field wouldn't spell the end. Minoru moved through these enhancements methodically, testing each idea against hypothetical scenarios. He pictured break-ins thwarted at the last second, laser grids and motion sensors rendered useless by a well-timed EMP blast, or Umbra-02 snatching a crucial component from under an enemy's nose. In the days that followed, Minoru's behavior did not go unnoticed. He grew quieter, more absorbed. During class, he barely responded to roll call, and when teachers asked questions he gave generic answers that allowed him to slip back into obscurity. Akane's curious gaze lingered on him from across the room. His parents remarked that he looked tired and pale, but they too were easily placated. After all, Minoru was something of a prodigy. The computers obeyed him, the household ran smoothly thanks to his silent improvements. His parents rarely pried into his projects, seeing him as a quiet genius too lost in his own world to need their guidance. They reveled in the convenience Minoru's inventions brought: automatic lighting, self-adjusting thermostats, grocery deliveries arranged without lifting a finger. In their comfort they left him alone. That was exactly what Minoru wanted: time and solitude. Uninterrupted sessions where sparks arced across circuit boards in the dead of night, where the only witnesses to his labor were the whir of miniature drills and the faint crackle of solder fusing metal and silicon. Umbra 02 took shape piece by piece. The drone's plating was as black as deep space, its edges sharp and angular, designed to slice through darkness and confuse depth perception. Its sensors were recessed beneath layers of adaptive mesh, making them all but invisible. When he finally activated the rotors, they emitted nothing but a subtle whisper. Minoru had managed to dampen the sound beyond even his expectations. When it hovered before him for the first time, Minoru felt a surge of pride. He had given this machine not only form but intelligence and purpose. As Umbra 02 performed its self-checks, its single crimson optical sensor glowed faintly. Minoru could almost see Delta gazing back at him through that eye, curious and attentive, like a newly trained guard dog waiting for a command. "Perfect," he said softly, smirking at his reflection in the drone's plating. "Now let's test you in the field." But before he could plan a new infiltration, he had to deal with the unknown, the figure who destroyed Umbra 01. He reviewed the data he had recovered: a few seconds of fragmented video feed, the blurred silhouette, the EMP grenade bearing a distinctive wolf's head logo encircled by stars. He expanded his net of research, diving into the dark corners of the net. Whispered rumors and half-forgotten files eventually guided him to Fenrir Solutions, a clandestine paramilitary group that specialized in corporate espionage. A name associated with unsolved high-profile incidents, data thefts, and intimidation tactics. Nothing proven, always rumors and conjecture. But Minoru knew better. When secrets were well hidden, that was proof in itself of serious skill. "A calling card," he murmured, fingers drumming on his keyboard as he flipped through hacked archives and encrypted chat logs. "They're either arrogant or leaving deliberate breadcrumbs." Fenrir Solutions didn't just take what they wanted. They left subtle marks of their presence, signs that would instill fear and confusion. Their motives remained unclear. Did they want the same tech he was after, or were they guarding it for a client? Either way, they had stepped onto his path. Minoru smirked. Fenrir's arrogance would be their weakness. No head-on confrontation. He was not a soldier, and he had no desire to become one. Instead, he would conduct information warfare. He would learn their routines, infiltrate their networks, sow false leads, and watch them chase phantoms. By the time they realized where their real threat lay, it would be too late. His plan came together in 3 steps. Step 1: Reconnaissance. Umbra 02 would slip into Fenrir's local base of operations, not to steal a prize but to map their security infrastructure, identify their surveillance blind spots, and collect intel on their communication frequencies and command structure. Step 2: Misdirection. With that intel, Minoru would weave a tapestry of disinformation, planting evidence that a rival organization was behind their recent setbacks. Fake logs, digital breadcrumbs, and subtle hints would redirect Fenrir's attention toward someone else entirely, stirring chaos within their ranks and drawing their resources away from Minoru's true goals. Step 3: Counterattack. Not a traditional assault, but a systematic dismantling of their operations. Blackouts in critical moments. Sensitive data leaked to their enemies. Key personnel misled into dangerous traps. By the time Minoru was done, Fenrir would be too preoccupied and disoriented to interfere with his main objectives. "Information warfare," Minoru whispered, eyes gleaming with excitement. He reached out and let Umbra 02 settle gently on his desk. The drone's red eye dimmed slightly as if acknowledging the calm before the storm. "Let's see how they handle fighting shadows. After all, I don't need to be seen to be victorious." He allowed himself a quiet chuckle. The Eminence in Shadow had found a formidable opponent, but far from intimidating him, it only sharpened his resolve. He would strike from behind the veil of zeros and ones, steel and carbon fiber, an invisible hand guiding the fate of those who dared challenge him. Soon, Fenrir Solutions would learn that true power did not stride boldly under the sun. It slipped between cracks in the night, unattainable and unbreakable. Late that night, Umbra-02 lifted off Minoru's desk with a whisper of rotor blades. No wasted motion, no unnecessary noise, just a graceful ascent into an ink-black sky. From his seat in front of the monitors, Minoru watched through the drone's camera feed, every angle relayed in crisp, high-definition clarity. The drone was more than just a machine, it was an extension of his will. Its newly installed adaptive AI, Delta, had spent hours assimilating data, heists, infiltration patterns, animal hunts, and military maneuvers. Now, on its maiden covert mission, it exhibited an almost living awareness, selecting paths with predatory cunning. The journey led Umbra-02 beyond the twinkling city center. Neon lights gave way to dimly lit warehouses and abandoned lots. Broken street lamps flickered sporadically, painting the world in a half-light that made shadows stretch unnaturally long. Eventually, the drone's destination emerged in the distance. A nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, bounded by a chain-link fence and watched over by a smattering of security cameras. To the average observer, it was nothing special, just another storage depot gathering dust at the city's edges. But Fenrir's presence changed everything. Minoru had identified this location as their local base. Fenrir Solutions, an elite paramilitary group deeply enmeshed in corporate espionage, was not known for flashy displays. Instead, they preferred anonymity, blending into the underbelly of the city's logistics and commerce. Yet Minoru could already see the subtle signs: the meticulous patrol routes, the scattered infrared detectors, the encrypted signals flickering across his network scanner. From his dimly lit room, Minoru observed the drone's approach, a can of soda in hand. He wore a calm, almost lazy expression, but behind his half-lidded eyes, his mind churned like a supercomputer. "Let's see how good you really are," he whispered, leaning forward. On the screen, Delta displayed several recommended ingress points: a gap in camera coverage near a loading bay, an overhead beam that offered a route to the second floor, and a ventilation shaft with improperly insulated sensors. The flaws in Fenrir's security were there if you knew how to look. Umbra-02 ascended to a vantage point above the fence, sensors mapping every guard's movements. The guards paced the perimeter at predictable intervals, their flashlights carving slices of light through the gloom. Cameras panned slowly, stuck to their programming, failing to account for an intruder that could alter form and climb walls. Minoru suppressed a chuckle at their overconfidence. Technology could be a shield, but it could also be a crutch, and here Fenrir was leaning too heavily. The drone slipped past the fence in silence. Its rotors were so quiet that the soft hum of a distant air conditioning unit masked them completely. Once inside, it crept along the warehouse's corrugated metal siding, micro-grappling hooks extending like insect legs, letting it cling and climb without leaving scratches. The warehouse's dull exterior light painted Umbra-02 as little more than a shifting shadow. Inside his room, Minoru sipped his soda, pleased. "Classic mistake," he murmured. "All tech, no intuition." At a second-story window, Umbra-02 paused. Its sensors detected a thermal alarm designed to trigger if the glass temperature changed abruptly. Minoru watched as the drone deployed a thin layer of nanites, liquid machines that flattened themselves against the pane, equalizing its surface temperature and nullifying the alarm. The AI's subtle hum filtered through Minoru's headphones as it analyzed and adapted. Moments later, the drone's precision laser cutter sliced a clean, silent hole in the glass. Umbra-02 slid inside, leaving the temperature sensors none the wiser. The interior was a stark contrast to the exterior's emptiness. Rows of crates formed artificial corridors that smelled faintly of machine oil and ozone. A half-dozen workstations glowed in dim, bluish light, their screens revealing reams of encrypted data. Armed operatives wandered between crates, rifles slung over their shoulders, their posture relaxed but vigilant. Above them, catwalks and beams crisscrossed the space like a skeleton frame, creating a labyrinth of vantage points. Umbra-02 took to these upper reaches, its black plating blending with the dark steel girders. From his command center, Minoru's eyes danced over the newly mapped interior. Delta highlighted points of interest with red outlines: a fortified server rack tucked near the back, a communications hub bristling with antennae and signal boosters on a raised platform, and an armory behind reinforced steel doors. Its interior hinted at cutting-edge weapon prototypes. "Let's start with the server," Minoru said quietly, adjusting his posture. The drone obliged, scuttling along the ceiling beams with a grace that felt almost biological. It dropped silently onto the server rack, attaching a multi-pronged data probe. Green lines of code on Minoru's monitor flickered as Umbra-02's worm began its work. Fenrir's encryption was dense, but Minoru's custom algorithms unraveled it bit by bit, revealing troves of data. Blackmail material on government officials, secret contracts with criminal organizations, and blueprints for experimental tech. Fenrir was more than a shadowy firm. It was a nexus of corruption and influence. "And now it's my web," Minoru said, lips curling into a grin. He filtered data packets, siphoning what he needed and leaving false trails for later. Next, the drone moved to the communications hub. Minoru had no interest in destroying Fenrir, yet. Instead, he planted his own digital seeds, a worm that would corrupt their files, scramble internal comms, and force Fenrir's operatives to chase ghosts. It was the perfect weapon, subtle, insidious, and time-delayed. "Let's see how you operate when you're chasing shadows," he murmured, leaning back as if enjoying a good movie. Umbra-02 had accomplished its primary goals. Minoru guided it toward the exit route. The drone navigated back to the window, ready to slip into the night. But suddenly, Delta displayed an alert. Footsteps too light, too measured, not part of the guard's routines. Minoru's heart quickened. He remembered the figure who downed Umbra-01, the operative whose face he had glimpsed only briefly. Now she stepped into view beneath the drone, her form cutting a lean, deadly silhouette. She wore a sleek black suit, and there was something in her posture that screamed absolute control and mastery. She paused, scanning the rafters as if listening to the silence. "Patience," Minoru whispered, barely breathing. He watched her move. She had the aura of a predator, a hawk searching for the slightest motion. Umbra-02 froze, its plating blending seamlessly with the dark beam. For a moment, Minoru dared to hope she would pass by. But something in her training or intuition tipped her off. Her gaze snapped upward, locking onto the exact spot where Umbra-02 hid. "Detected," Minoru said through clenched teeth. "Delta, evasive maneuvers." The drone responded instantly, dropping from the beam just as a throwing knife zipped through the air, embedding itself into the metal with a sharp ping. The operative gave chase, drawing a compact EMP pistol designed for close encounters. But Umbra-02 was not Umbra-01. It weaved between crates, shifting its configuration mid-flight, reducing its silhouette. It deployed decoy flashes, tiny bursts of bright light and chaff to confuse thermal and optical sensors, and crawled under a conveyor belt, then hopped over a barricade. Minoru's fingers danced over the keyboard, feeding escape commands as fast as he could think them. The drone made for the window, deploying a micro-explosive that shattered the glass outward without a sound loud enough to alert distant patrols. Once outside, its rotors spun at maximum thrust, sending it darting into the starless night. The figure watched from the broken window, her posture relaxed, a small, dangerous smile on her lips. She'd nearly caught it. This wasn't over. Late at night, in the hush that followed Fenrir's infiltration, Minoru found himself perched at the threshold of a new and more dangerous world. An uninvited guest had arrived. Before he could dive back into Fenrir's files, his ears caught a subtle disturbance. He stilled, hand hovering over his keyboard, listening intently. This was no household creak of wood settling or the comforting hum of electronics. It was footsteps, cautious and deliberate. He glanced at the digital clock on his monitor's edge, confirming what he already knew. No one should be here. His parents were away, enjoying an all-expenses-paid hot springs trip in Okinawa. They had even taken the family dog John, leaving him blissfully alone, or so he'd thought. While others might have found the exclusion hurtful, Minoru had been secretly relieved. Their absence meant fewer distractions. Now though he wished he had a barking deterrent. Instead, silence pressed in, and he felt the subtle shift in the air that only a true predator's presence could create. Another step. Then another. A soft click echoed from downstairs, the sound of a lock expertly circumvented or a latch eased open. Minoru's heart quickened, not out of fear but out of anticipation. Someone was here. Someone who wasn't supposed to be. He rose slowly, careful not to scrape the legs of his chair against the floor. The corridor light was off. He had left it that way to remain shrouded in darkness, but now it worked against him. He strained his ears for a clue, his eyes flicking to the open door of his bedroom as he considered his options. Should he hide? Attempt a quick escape through the window? Set one of his improvised traps? Before he could decide, the door to his room creaked open, and there she stood, the woman from the warehouse, framed by the faint glow of his monitors. She slipped into the room soundlessly, each movement economical as if choreographed. Her presence radiated a quiet, lethal confidence. Just as Minoru had studied infiltration and surveillance tactics, this woman must have studied human prey. Her posture, her calm breathing, her unwavering eyes, everything about her said she was used to being in control. "Minoru Kageno," she said, her voice a smooth current of sound amidst the silence. Her eyes roamed over his workshop with mild amusement. The tangle of electronics, the reams of code visible on his monitors, the half-hidden tools, it must have looked like a secret command center. "You've been busy." Minoru's mind raced. She had come straight here, which meant she'd followed the trail from the warehouse or had sources feeding her intel on his identity. Either way, she'd made her move boldly. No reinforcements announced themselves, no clumsy ambushes. Just her, an assassin so self-assured she needed no backup. He forced a casual grin, leaning back in his chair as if he were about to greet a classmate. "Funny, I was just about to look you up," he said with airy confidence. "Didn't expect you to save me the trouble." The woman stepped further into the room, and as the angle changed, Minoru noticed how her eyes sharpened, scanning for escape routes and concealed weapons. Her earlier amusement gave way to a measured seriousness, though there remained a flicker of playful challenge in her gaze. "You're talented," she said, taking note of the complex setup. "Too talented for a high school student. But talent doesn't excuse arrogance." Minoru tilted his head as if contemplating her words. On the surface he looked relaxed, but inside he was assessing her stance, the angle of her shoulders, the tension in her legs. She was ready to pounce at any second. "Arrogance?" he repeated softly, letting a small laugh escape his lips. "I call it ambition." A smirk touched her lips as she drew a sleek, matte black knife from a hidden sheath. The metal reflected the soft glow of his monitors, a whispered hint of danger. "Let's see if ambition keeps you alive." Minoru's grin widened, the adrenaline surging through his veins. This was it, everything he had trained for. "Let's find out," he said, voice low. A hush fell over the room, thick and charged. He could almost taste the tension, each breath more deliberate than the last. While others his age might have panicked, Minoru felt alive. The very shadows he once longed to manipulate were now pressing down on him, testing him, daring him to prove he belonged. "I hope you're not thinking of calling for help," the woman said, casually flipping the knife in her hand. "By the time anyone arrives, it'll be too late." Minoru chuckled, leaning even further back as though her threat was a poor joke. "Call for help? Nah." He raised an eyebrow, his gaze never leaving her weapon. "This is much more fun." "Fun?" she echoed, voice edged with disbelief. "You really don't understand who you're dealing with, do you?" "I've got an idea," Minoru replied smoothly. His tone was light, almost mocking. He knew he was playing with fire, but that was the whole point. He glanced at her knife, then back at her face. "The question is, do you know who you're dealing with?" For the briefest moment, her smirk deepened. Then, without warning, she lunged, her blade a silver flash aimed straight for his throat. Minoru was already moving. He vaulted backward over his chair, forcing it toward her as a makeshift shield before rolling across the floor and snatching a hidden metal baton from beneath his desk. They clashed in a shower of sparks as the baton met the blade. The woman's strikes were crisp and precise, each blow honed to kill. She moved like a machine, every attack part of a calculated sequence. By contrast, Minoru's style was wild and unpredictable, a brew of street brawling, self-taught techniques, and countless nights of ambushing gang members for fun and practice. He adapted on the fly, slipping out of her patterns and forcing her to adjust. "You're good," she admitted, surprise creeping into her voice as he parried another strike. "For a kid." Minoru smirked as he ducked under a slash, lashing out with a quick jab that knocked her off balance. "Good? I'm aiming for legendary," he said. It was not a boast but a statement of fact. His eyes gleamed with a kind of mania reserved for those who revel in trials that would break lesser souls. She came at him harder now, blade singing through the air. He gave ground, evaluating her moves. There was something off, something too perfect about her reflexes. When a human fought, even a trained one, there were tells, micro-movements, uneven breathing, the subtle lag between thought and action. This woman had none of that. It was as if she anticipated his moves a fraction of a second before he made them. "You're enhanced," he said, twisting away from a lethal thrust. His voice grew analytical, the playful bravado fading at the edges. "Not just training. There's something else." He felt a subtle, intangible presence radiating from her, something that defied his understanding. She hesitated for a split second, and Minoru seized the opening, pressing forward aggressively. He drove her back across the room until both were breathing heavily, locked in a deadly dance. "You're sharper than I thought," she admitted, holding her knife low, ready to pounce again. "But it won't save you." Her eyes hardened, and he sensed she was preparing a final, decisive attack. Minoru twirled his baton and took a measured step back, even as adrenaline thrummed in his veins. "Let me guess, Fenrir didn't send you just because I hacked their files. There's something bigger at play." She stiffened, and the smug amusement drained from her face. "You truly don't know what you've stepped into, do you? The shadows you're so eager to play in, they belong to us." A chill ran down Minoru's spine, followed immediately by an exhilarating rush. "Us. The cult of Diabolos," she answered, voice low and dangerous. "Fenrir is just a front, a tool to gather resources and silence threats. And you? You've just painted a target on your back." Minoru's thoughts flashed to the rumors he'd always dismissed, ancient whispers of a clandestine group manipulating the world's fate from behind a curtain of myth. He had assumed such stories were legends, internet memes, late-night message board fabrications. Now, staring into the eyes of one of their operatives, he realized they were real, and they considered him worthy of notice. "The cult of Diabolos, huh?" he said, his grin returning with renewed intensity. "So I've finally caught your attention. Took you long enough." "You think this is a game?" she asked, incredulous. Her composure faltered for an instant, as if she couldn't comprehend his flippancy in the face of certain death. "For me it is," Minoru replied, his tone maddeningly casual. It was time to show her that he wasn't just an overconfident kid. He was the wild card, the variable they couldn't predict. "And I just leveled up." Before she could form a retort, his hand darted under the desk, finding a hidden button. The room filled with thick smoke as a concealed emitter hissed to life, stinging the air and obscuring their vision. The woman hissed, momentarily blinded, slashing uselessly at the space where Minoru had stood. In that heartbeat of confusion, he seized a prearranged escape route. A rope anchored outside the window waited for him. He vaulted onto the sill and swung out into the alley, his landing muffled by the shadows and the distant hum of nighttime traffic. Above him, Umbra 02 hovered in silent vigil. He grabbed onto its reinforced harness, and the drone lifted him skyward, away from his would-be assassin. As the wind rushed past, Minoru looked down at the city lights. The cult had revealed themselves. They thought they owned the darkness, but now he knew their name, their methods, and their arrogance. The night stretched out before him, full of possibilities. He was no mere intruder in their domain. He was Minoru Kageno, the self-appointed eminence in shadow, and he would turn their fearsome reputation against them. They had stepped out of the stories and into his world, and now he would make them regret it. As Umbra 02 carried him into the darkness, Minoru's pulse thrummed with anticipation. He had found something to challenge his ambitions, to test his mettle. A grin stretched across his face as he whispered into the night, "Time to bring your entire operation crumbling down from the shadows." Hours later, Umbra 02 returned to Minoru's backup workshop, an unassuming rented storage unit near the industrial district. He flicked on a desk lamp, its warm golden glow revealing a cramped space strewn with spare parts, soldering irons, and a few sealed crates. He set the drone on a makeshift charging dock and began combing through the stolen data. His triumphant smirk faded into thoughtful intensity as he parsed Fenrir's files. They weren't just mercenaries for hire. This operation was bigger. Hidden partnerships, encrypted correspondences pointing to something called the Cult of Diabolos, a shadowy organization rumored to manipulate the world from behind the scenes. Minoru paused at a file labeled Project Epsilon. Its encryption was denser than anything he'd seen from Fenrir so far. This had to be something critical, maybe a keystone of their plans. He didn't try to crack it now, he would need time and more computing power. Instead, he looked over the names, the places, and cross-referenced them with his own stolen intelligence. The pieces began to form a pattern, a constellation of hidden influences. He felt exhilaration course through him. The cult of Diabolos was real and they had noticed him. Perfect. He recalled the confrontation in his own bedroom just hours earlier. The same woman who'd nearly downed Umbra 02 had broken into his home. He could still feel the tension in the air, see the gleam of her knife, and taste the adrenaline in his throat. She had called him arrogant, accused him of underestimating her strength. Yet he had held his own, escaping into the night with a roguish grin. That wasn't fear he felt, it was delight. He wanted to face them again, to outmaneuver these so-called masters of the shadows. As the night pressed on, Minoru set to work. Surrounded by silent crates and humming computer fans, he refined his next moves. analyzing Fenrir's network traffic, preparing new exploits, planning future infiltration routes. He installed fresh defense systems in his new hideout. He would remain mobile and unpredictable. The cult of Diabolos had shown their hand, and now Minoru would ensure that every step they took toward him led them deeper into his web. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the quiet war being waged in its underbelly. In a world of hidden powers, Minoru Kageno was carving a place for himself, a place where he was the one pulling strings. The cult thought they owned the shadows, but Minoru knew better. He had earned his right to dwell in darkness and bend it to his will. He would orchestrate their downfall with the same detached thrill an artist feels before painting a masterpiece. As he settled into his chair, encrypting his new files and preparing to crack Project Epsilon, a smile hovered on his lips. He didn't just want to survive against this mysterious cult, he wanted to claim the shadows for himself. And if the cult of Diabolos believed they could intimidate him, they were about to discover just how wrong they were. He was smiling. Chapter 1 Extra, S Perspective. The smoke cleared slowly, the faint scent of ozone and burning chemicals lingering like a memory. Stood in the dim glow of the monitors, her knife clenched tightly in her hand. She scanned the room with a hunter's intensity. Nothing moved, no whisper of footsteps betrayed Minoru's return. He was gone. Her jaw tightened. She had let him slip away. The boy, no, the threat, had vanished into the night, leaving her with only questions and the unsettling realization that she had underestimated him. A teenager had held his ground, nearly matching her blow for blow. That alone was difficult to rationalize. She sheathed her knife in a swift, controlled motion. Her orders had been clear. Identify the boy's capabilities, neutralize him if necessary, and retrieve any stolen data. Now she had to report a failure. For someone of her standing, failure was anathema. A quick survey of the room told her he was no common hacker. Disassembled gadgets covered the desk like puzzle pieces waiting for assembly, each one advanced beyond standard consumer tech. Weapon prototypes and unconventional surveillance tools, he was building these in secret, under his family's nose in a suburban bedroom. Every detail hinted that the boy's talents were far from ordinary. This wasn't an amateur dabbling in cybercrime. This was an innovator, a tactician who had planned for contingencies even she hadn't anticipated. Her communicator buzzed. She tapped the device in her ear, voice low and composed. This is... Target escaped. The reply crackled in her earpiece. Unacceptable. You were told to handle this swiftly. The Kageno boy is a liability. I underestimated him, said curt and honest. Pride was a luxury she could not afford here. He's not just a liability. He's an anomaly. Explain. The command was terse, but curiosity edged the voice on the other end. Moved closer to Minoru's workbench, her fingers trailing over a half-completed grappling hook launcher. It was sleek, compact, and more advanced than standard-issue military gear. He'd been on the cusp of finishing it. How long until he perfected something like this and put it to use? His combat skills are advanced, she reported, lifting the prototype to examine its mechanisms. The craftsmanship was meticulous. He fights as if he's had years of frontline experience. But it's more than that. His intellect, his tech surpasses standard designs. And the way he anticipated my moves, it was as though he could predict my strategy in real time. She set the device down gently, taking care not to make a sound. This isn't natural. He's too far ahead for his age, his background. It's as if he's been preparing for this his entire life. A weighted silence passed. Finally the voice spoke. Interesting. Could he be an asset for our cause? No, replied immediately, voice resolute. He's too dangerous. He doesn't seem to crave power for its own sake, nor justice, nor survival. His motivation is elusive. He acts as if this is a game, as if he's orchestrating a grand performance we can't see. Then eliminate him, the voice said coldly. S. gaze swept the room again, noting how cleverly Minoru had arranged his escape routes, his failsafes. He had encrypted and purged his system. No data remained to plunder. This was someone who always expected company, someone who planned 3 steps ahead. With respect, I don't think that's possible. Not yet, she said. Killing him will require more than brute force. He's resourceful, unpredictable. If we attack him head-on, he'll slip through again. Then we'll use precision. Have you secured the stolen files? Her lips thinned. No. He encrypted and wiped them before I arrived. A faint note of amusement laced the reply. Clever indeed. Very well. Return to base for debriefing. We'll escalate the operation. Then, as if reading her mind, A final text-based warning flashed across her communicator's interface. "Do not fail us again, Agent Olivier." Olivier's eyes narrowed at the message. She pressed her lips into a tight line. Failure. She detested that word. For the cult of Diabolos there was no margin for error, and yet here she was. Slowly, she stepped out into the hallway, leaving no trace of her presence behind. As silently as she had come, she slipped out of the house, becoming just another phantom in the tranquil suburb. As she made her way to the extraction point, her thoughts turned to Project Epsilon. This elusive operation had indirectly led her to Minoru Kageno. Even within the cult, Epsilon was whispered about in hushed tones. It was rumored to revolve around a long-lost artifact tied to ancient legends of a demon, Diabolos, a central pillar of the cult's twisted history. Epsilon was not just another mission. It was the key to unlocking something monumental and dangerous, something that could redefine their power in the world. She'd glimpsed the prototype once, a humanoid figure enhanced by forbidden alchemy and cutting-edge tech. A living weapon, an ultimate enforcer. Its existence hinted at the cult's ultimate ambition, to tap directly into the essence of Diabolos. If they succeeded, their influence would become absolute. But how had Minoru discovered it? How had he even gleaned fragments of Epsilon's existence among Fenrir's files? Fenrir, after all, was merely a proxy, a layer of obfuscation for the cult's true intentions. For him to have found hints of something so deeply buried spoke volumes about his skill and his daring. He was peeling back their layers at an alarming pace. A chill tickled down Olivier's spine. She considered herself a predator, a blade wielded by the cult with impeccable precision. She had taken down countless targets, most of them seasoned fighters, cunning criminals, or highly trained operatives. Yet this high school boy had forced her to retreat, to report failure. As the black transport vehicle pulled up, its tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants inside, Olivier paused. She felt a subtle unease, a nagging question gnawing at her confidence. Were they dealing with a mere prodigy or something more? Minoru Kageno moved in the shadows with a confidence that suggested he'd been there for years, waiting for opponents like her. He had challenged a member of the cult's elite and walked away, grinning as he vanished into the dark. The cult prided itself on operating in the deepest shadows, puppeteering the fate of nations. But now a new player had entered their domain, one they had not foreseen. Minoru Kageno was an outlier, an anomaly. And anomalies, in the cult's experience, could be the most dangerous of all. Olivier stepped into the vehicle, pulling the door shut behind her. The engine purred quietly as they slipped away into the city's labyrinth of streets. She resolved to learn from this encounter. Next time she would be prepared. Next time the advantage would be hers. Yet, as the car accelerated, a whisper of doubt echoed in her mind. Who was truly the predator and who was the prey? For the first time, the idea that their carefully woven tapestry of secrets and power could unravel at the hands of a single cunning opponent began to take root. Minoru Kageno might be a mere teenager, but he represented something new, something unpredictable, a rising darkness dancing at the edge of their vision, mocking them with its elusive shape. And that, Olivier knew, was the kind of threat the cult of Diabolos had never learned how to contain. Chapter 2: The Shadows of the Past. The moon hung high above the city, a silver sentinel casting its glow over the crumbling industrial district. Silence reigned, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the whisper of wind through rusting metal. Hidden amidst a patch of overgrown shrubs and debris-strewn hills overlooking the warehouse, Minoru Kageno sat motionless in his makeshift camp. A small, reinforced tent blended into the surroundings, its fabric coated with shadow-dampening material to avoid detection from thermal drones. Inside, Minoru hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen painting his face in shades of cold blue and green. Cables snaked across the ground to his power supply, while portable monitors and a communications terminal surrounded him like a digital fortress. Through Umbra 02's feed, Minoru had the perfect view. The drone darted silently above the derelict warehouse, its cloaking system rendering it invisible to all but the most sophisticated sensors. Minoru's fingers rested lightly on his keyboard, adjusting the drone's position with subtle movements. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he muttered under his breath, watching as Umbra 02 swept low across the building. This was the place Olivier's files had pointed him to, a supposedly abandoned warehouse on the edge of the industrial sector. But nothing about it seemed abandoned. Faint glimmers of light leaked from cracks in the walls, and shadows passed intermittently behind the boarded-up windows. 2 guards loitered near the entrance, dressed in civilian clothes, but their posture, tense and sharp, betrayed their real purpose. They weren't just hired thugs. They were trained professionals. They think they're clever, hiding in plain sight, Minoru thought with a small smirk. They've never dealt with me. Umbra 02 floated higher, its sensors scanning for weaknesses. Minoru's screen displayed a schematic overlay, highlighting structural flaws, vent systems, and hidden thermal activity. Definitely not your average warehouse, he murmured, his eyes flicking to a vent near the roof. Rusted, loose, and forgotten. Found you. From his hidden position, Minoru issued the command. Umbra 02 approached the vent, its manipulators extending to pry away the rusted grating. It slipped inside, navigating the claustrophobic ductwork with the precision of a surgeon. On his screen, Minoru watched the camera feed jitter as the drone crawled forward. Narrow beams of moonlight leaked through cracks in the roof, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the stale air. Keep it steady, Delta, Minoru whispered, addressing the drone's adaptive AI. When Umbra 02 emerged into the main chamber, Minoru's heart skipped a beat. The interior of the warehouse was cavernous, like a forgotten temple to industry. Rows of machinery lay draped in heavy tarps, their forms hulking and indistinct. Power cables snaked along the floor, pulsing faintly with energy. Crates stacked in organized rows bore the faint markings of the cult of Diabolos, cryptic symbols etched into their surfaces. But it was the glowing console at the center of the room that caught Minoru's attention. Bingo, he whispered. The drone descended slowly, its rotors a whisper of sound against the cavernous silence. Its manipulator arms extended, linking to the terminal with a series of quiet clicks. Minoru's laptop lit up with a flood of incoming data. Lines of encrypted code spilled across the screen, symbols and logs unraveling under his decryption software. Let's see what you're hiding, Minoru muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. As he worked, the puzzle began to assemble before him. Project Epsilon was not a weapons initiative, it was bioengineering. The cult of Diabolos had been conducting experiments on human subjects, forcing them to become vessels for something greater. The log spoke of failures, dozens, hundreds of them, but there were successes too. Humanoid figures and photo files appeared before him. Distorted, unfinished forms submerged in massive vats of glowing green liquid. Limbs that stretched unnaturally, flesh fused with cybernetic implants. Minoru's eyes narrowed. They're making more than soldiers. They're making monsters. The screen flickered, and a single name appeared repeatedly across several logs. Aurora. Minoru paused, staring at the word. A code name? A weapon? A person? He dug deeper into the files, searching for answers. What are you, Aurora? Before he could process further, a sharp beep interrupted his focus. On the drone's feed, Umbra 02's sensors blared a proximity warning. Minoru's posture straightened immediately, his pulse quickening. The faint hum of charging weaponry echoed through the warehouse. Footsteps, heavy, disciplined, entered the feed as armed guards marched into the chamber. Their faces were obscured by tactical helmets, but their intent was unmistakable. Damn it, Minoru hissed, snapping back to the controls. Delta, abort the download. Get out of there. Umbra 02 disengaged from the terminal, its cloak flickering back online as it shot toward the vent. But the guards weren't amateurs. One of them carried an electromagnetic scanner, sweeping the air methodically. The beam washed over the drone's location, illuminating its outline briefly in a ripple of static. There's something here, one of the guards shouted. Minoru's knuckles went white against the keyboard. An EMP charge launched with a deafening pulse. Umbra 02's cloaking field failed, leaving the drone fully exposed. On Minoru's screen, the camera feed glitched as bullets ripped through the air. Sparks burst from Umbra 02's stabilizer as a round clipped its frame, sending it spinning into a chaotic freefall. Come on, Delta. Recover. Minoru growled, his voice tense. The drone's adaptive AI kicked in, compensating for the damaged stabilizer. Umbra 02 leveled out, zigzagging wildly as it shot for the vent. Bullets chased it, ricocheting off metal beams and machinery. The guards shouted orders, but the drone was too quick. Umbra 02 twisted through the vent, its camera shaking violently as it burst back into the night. Minoru let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding as the drone's feed showed the warehouse shrinking into the distance. Smoke trailed from Umbra 02's damaged stabilizer, but it was intact. For now. That was too close, Minoru muttered, his voice tight. He pulled the drone back toward his position, glancing at the decrypted files still flickering on his screen. While incomplete, what he'd gathered was enough to confirm his suspicions. Project Epsilon. Bioengineered monsters. The name Aurora etched into every log like a forewarning. Minoru leaned back against the tent wall, his laptop's glow reflecting in his eyes. The cult of Diabolos had overplayed their hand, leaving him breadcrumbs they thought no one could follow. But he was different. He was already inside their shadow, pulling their strings before they could even realize it. As Umbra 02 landed gently on the hillside, its damaged frame humming faintly, Minoru allowed a dark grin to spread across his face. "They're making monsters," he murmured to himself, closing the files with a tap of his keyboard. "But they haven't met the real nightmare yet." He packed up the drone and shut down the camp systems, leaving nothing behind but cold air and crushed grass. The cult thought they owned the shadows, but Minoru was already there, unseen and unstoppable. The hunt had begun. A few minutes later, the industrial district sprawled out beneath the moonlight, its skeletal structures casting jagged shadows over cracked pavement and abandoned machinery. Umbra 02 cut through the air, weaving unsteadily above rusted pipes and crumbling buildings. Its once perfect flight was compromised, the damaged stabilizer trailing a thin plume of smoke that curled like a ghost in the cold night air. Minoru watched its feet anxiously, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of his laptop. "Just hold it together a little longer," he murmured, his voice soft but urgent. His eyes flicked between the drone's live diagnostics and its navigation map. The workshop, the small hidden haven he'd cobbled together, was only a few hundred meters away. Umbra 02's thruster sputtered again, its display flashing critical errors. Warning beeps blared through Minoru's headset as the drone wobbled mid-air, fighting to stay aloft. "Come on. You're almost there," Minoru urged, leaning closer as if his proximity could will the drone onward. But gravity had other plans. The main thruster cut out entirely with a sharp hiss, and Umbra 02 plummeted like a stone. Its camera feed spun wildly before going black with a final, distorted screech. Minoru bolted upright, knocking his chair over in his haste. His laptop tumbled to the side as he sprinted out of the tent, his cloak billowing behind him like a shadow breaking free. The night air hit him like a wall, sharp and frigid, as his boots pounded against the uneven ground. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, and the faint hum of searchlights crept closer. "Come on, come on," Minoru muttered, his breath puffing visibly in the cold. Rounding a corner, he skidded to a halt. There it was. Umbra 02 lay crumpled on the cracked asphalt, a heap of scorched metal and shattered parts. Its once sleek frame was marred with bullet holes, the stabilizer crushed beyond repair. The drone's optical sensor flickered erratically, its crimson light stuttering like the last beat of a heart. Minoru knelt beside it, his chest tightening. "You did good," he said softly, his tone filled with a rare sincerity. He reached out carefully as if afraid of hurting it further, and lifted the broken drone into his arms. Umbra 02 let out a faint, glitching chirp, a shadow of the AI's usual responsive hum. The light in its sensor dimmed completely. Minoru stood, his mind racing even as the distant sound of alarms grew louder. Spotlights began sweeping the far end of the lot, beams of white light cutting through the darkness and inching toward his position. Not good. He cast one last glance at the makeshift tent he'd called his temporary workshop. Its equipment, tools, and supplies would have to be abandoned. The cult's forces were closing in and he couldn't afford to be seen here. Clutching Umbra 02 tightly against his chest, Minoru turned and sprinted into the night, disappearing into the labyrinthine alleys of the industrial zone. Minoru pushed open the door to his hidden workshop, exhaustion tugging at his every step. The small, underground room had been carved out of a forgotten sub-basement beneath the city, shielded from prying eyes and electromagnetic scans. Rows of monitors blinked to life as he entered, casting the cluttered space in a soft glow. Tools were scattered across benches, stacks of spare parts, salvaged circuit boards, and wires filled every corner like organized chaos. He set Umbra 02 gently on the central workbench, its broken form stark against the sterile white surface. Taking a deep breath, Minoru pulled up a stool and began a preliminary examination. "Let's see what we've got left," he muttered, connecting the drone to his primary diagnostic console. The screen filled with error messages, burnt circuits, destabilized thrusters, corrupted auxiliary systems. Umbra 02 had been pushed to its absolute limit, its loyal AI delta barely holding together. Yet despite the catastrophic damage, Minoru's chest loosened with relief as the salvaged files began to decrypt. Lines of data appeared on the screen. Schematics, test logs, and reports from the cult's experiments. He read in silence, his expression growing darker with every line. The cult of Diabolos wasn't just tampering with power, they were attempting to recreate it. Project Epsilon wasn't an ordinary bioengineering program. It was a grotesque attempt to forge human beings into vessels, capable of containing inhuman levels of strength and resilience. Each file detailed the horrifying failures. Subjects who collapsed under the strain, their bodies unable to withstand the process. Yet a chilling few were labeled viable. And the word Aurora reappeared everywhere. Reports described it, or perhaps her, as the cornerstone of the project. Whether Aurora was the origin of the cult's experiments or the result of their twisted ambition was unclear, but Minoru could sense her significance. "They're trying to play God," Minoru murmured, rubbing his temples. The weight of the revelation settled on his shoulders, heavy and unrelenting. And they've succeeded, somehow. He turned back to Umbra 02, his gaze softening as he studied the wreckage. The drone was more than a tool to him, it was a companion, a manifestation of his skill, his resolve. But seeing it in such a battered state stirred a deep unease within him. "This is my best work," Minoru whispered. His brow furrowed as doubt crept into his thoughts. Umbra 02 had been built with the best materials he could access and the most advanced systems he could design. And yet it had barely survived. What if next time it doesn't make it back? Minoru ran a hand through his hair, frustration crackling like static in his mind. The cult of Diabolos wasn't playing fair anymore. They were throwing everything they had at protecting their secrets. He couldn't rely on raw skill alone. He needed to rethink his approach, refine his tools, and anticipate every possible failure. "No, this can't happen again," Minoru said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts. He straightened, determination sharpening his features. Umbra 02's survival wasn't just a matter of repair, it was a matter of evolution. Minoru grabbed his notebook, flipping to an empty page and sketching furiously. Ideas poured out of him like a torrent. Reinforced carbon alloy plating for durability, redundant circuit pathways to counter EMPs, a compact shielding generator to absorb ballistic impact, and an upgraded cloaking system designed to fool even electromagnetic scans. He paused, tapping the edge of his pen against his chin. "Self-repair protocols," he muttered. "A nanite-based system to heal minor damage during the mission. That'll buy time if things go south." His eyes flickered toward his dwindling supply of parts. His backup workshop wasn't nearly as stocked as his primary workspace back home. Fixing Umbra 02, let alone upgrading it, would take weeks, maybe a month, to gather the resources. That meant delaying his counterattack, a thought that gnawed at him. But rushing would only guarantee failure. Minoru looked down at Umbra 02, its shattered body a silent testament to its sacrifice. He rested a hand on the drone's frame, his voice low but resolute. "You've earned your rest. I promise I'll fix you up. Stronger, faster, unstoppable." The faint hum of his monitors filled the workshop as Minoru returned to his sketches, refining his plans with methodical precision. He was no stranger to setbacks. Every failure was just a lesson, every broken part a foundation for something better. The cult of Diabolos thought they were untouchable, but they'd shown him their hand. "Take your time," Minoru muttered to himself, a small grin pulling at his lips. "Because once I'm ready, I'll dismantle your entire empire piece by piece." And so he worked, the glow of his screens reflecting in his sharp eyes as the shadows outside deepened. Umbra 02 would rise again, not just repaired but reborn. And this time it wouldn't just survive. It would dominate. 1 month, 2 weeks later. The dim light of Minoru's hidden workshop flickered intermittently, dancing across walls covered in blueprints, schematics, and hastily scribbled notes. The space had grown more chaotic in the past weeks, a clear reflection of Minoru's relentless work and sleepless nights. Bits of metal, frayed wires, and scorched circuit boards littered the floor like discarded thoughts. Yet to Minoru the mess was purposeful. It was the forge where ideas became reality. At the center of it all hovered Umbra 02, its once sleek black frame now tarnished with the scars of countless missions. The drone drifted slightly off-kilter, one stabilizer still sputtering intermittently. Sparks crackled faintly from exposed wiring, and its optical sensor flickered like an old, tired light. "Hold still, will you?" Minoru grumbled, his voice soft but steady. Hunched over the workbench, he soldered delicately, the faint glow of his tools reflecting in his narrowed eyes. "This is the 5th time this week. You're lucky I don't charge for repairs." In response, Umbra 02 emitted a low, almost sheepish chirp. Its optical sensor dimmed briefly as though to apologize. Minoru sighed, leaning back in his chair as the soldering tool cooled in his hand. He set it down with a clatter and turned his gaze to the drone, his expression softening. "You've been through worse, but even you can't take this kind of punishment forever." The drone whirred faintly as if trying to reassure him, but Minoru wasn't convinced. For all its resilience, Umbra 02 was breaking down. Minoru had cobbled together quick fixes and makeshift repairs, but there was only so much he could do without access to high-grade components. Its cloaking system faltered under pressure, its thrusters couldn't sustain peak performance, and the circuitry, no matter how many patches Minoru applied, was at its limit. He glanced over at the stolen files on his secondary monitor, the grim details staring back at him. The mountain complex. Hidden deep within cliffside rock, surrounded by natural defenses and minimal weak points. Olivier's files described it as one of the Cult of Diabolo's most secure locations, a fortress guarding secrets Minoru could only imagine. "And whatever's in there," he muttered, rubbing his temple, "it's something they can't afford to lose." The memory of Umbra 02's last infiltration resurfaced, the fortified outpost disguised as a derelict warehouse. The drone had gone deeper than ever before, slipping through infrared grids and thermal scanners. It had gotten him the data he needed, but the cult's response had been brutal. A hidden EMP burst had knocked Umbra 02's cloaking offline, and in those few seconds of vulnerability, the cult's guards had unleashed hell. Minoru could still hear the drone's feed, the gunfire, the metallic shriek of ricocheting bullets, the growing hum of its failing systems. Despite everything, Umbra 02 had clawed its way out and delivered the mission data just before collapsing. "Always the hero," Minoru said quietly, a small smile tugging at his lips. He patted the drone gently and it emitted a soft hum, almost a purr, its AI delta responding to his touch. But even as he smiled, the truth weighed heavily on his mind. Umbra 02 couldn't keep up with the growing danger. The cult's defenses were escalating, smarter detection systems, more advanced weaponry, and better trained operatives. Sending the drone out as it was would be suicide. Minoru's fingers tapped rhythmically on the bench, his sharp mind already sifting through possibilities. He needed something more. Something better. A spark of inspiration flashed behind his eyes, and he sat up straight. "Umbra 03, he muttered, the words barely louder than a breath. His hands were already reaching for his notebook. A new design. Faster, tougher, and with stealth systems that won't break under pressure. Umbra 02 beeped softly as if offering approval. Minoru chuckled, the sound tinged with melancholy. "Don't worry. You'll still be part of the team," he said, glancing over at the tired drone. "You've earned that much." He knew Umbra 02's time on the front lines was coming to an end, but Delta, the AI core, was irreplaceable. Its experience, its adaptability, even its quirks, that would live on in the new frame. Over the following days, the workshop became a whirlwind of progress. Minoru worked with manic precision, designing and building what would become Umbra 03. The new drone would be a culmination of everything he'd learned. Its frame was reinforced with lightweight carbon nanotube alloys scavenged from an abandoned R&D site, giving it near-impervious durability without sacrificing speed. Modularity was its core principle, interchangeable parts that could adapt to any mission. The stealth system was rebuilt from the ground up, integrating Minoru's latest prototype cloaking field, far beyond anything Umbra 02 had ever carried. "Adaptive thermal masking," Minoru murmured, testing a small projection device on his bench. A cloud of faint distortion shimmered above it, invisible to the naked eye. An active EM scrambling. Good luck detecting this. At the center of Umbra 03, Minoru installed Umbra 02's AI core. It was a delicate process. Delta was more than just code. It was his creation, honed through countless missions. Transferring it meant giving Umbra 03 not just intelligence but experience. When it was done, Minoru stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. Umbra 03 hovered silently before him, its matte black plating glinting faintly under the workshop's flickering lights. It was smaller, sleeker, yet unmistakably menacing. "Looking sharp," Minoru said, allowing himself a grin. "You're going to love this." Across the bench, Umbra 02 lay powered down, its optical sensor dim. Minoru swore it looked satisfied, as though passing the torch to its successor. A few days later, Minoru sat on the edge of the workbench, his expression pensive as he watched Umbra 03 perform a flawless aerial test. The new drone was everything he'd hoped for, fast, versatile, and impossibly quiet. Yet as he watched it weave through invisible targets, his thoughts turned inward. Technology was his strength, his greatest weapon, but it couldn't be his only weapon. The cult of Diabolos had resources beyond his imagination, and sooner or later, he would need to confront them himself. Minoru glanced at the stolen blueprints pinned to his wall, concept sketches for experimental gadgets, designs for weaponized gear he hadn't yet tested. Ideas sparked like fireworks in his mind. He would need new tools. Tools for infiltration, for sabotage, and, if it came to it, for combat. He stood, stretching his sore muscles as determination hardened his features. "Fieldwork's essential," he muttered, walking toward the corner of the workshop where a dusty backpack sat. "If I want to spread my influence, I need to be ready to move in the shadows myself." But to make this a reality, he needed access to better tools, gear he couldn't build in the limited confines of this backup workshop. That meant taking a risk, a return to his real workshop back home. Under cover of darkness, Minoru slipped back into the city, his route meticulously planned to avoid detection. The quiet streets felt both familiar and foreign as he crept toward his family home, his once secure fortress. Sliding through a window he'd modified months ago, Minoru exhaled softly as he re-entered his old workshop. Everything was still there, his tools, his prototypes, his spare parts. The hum of dormant machines greeted him like old friends. He wasted no time collecting what he needed. His advanced soldering rig, high-density battery cores, microsensors, cloaking mesh, and the half-finished prototypes he'd abandoned weeks ago. By the time Minoru slipped back into his hidden workshop, the gears of his plan were already turning. Over the following days he merged everything he'd taken, every stolen concept, every salvaged tool, into his new arsenal. A reinforced combat cloak. A lightweight exoskeleton for silent movement. Wrist-mounted gadgets for hacking, disruption, and escape. The cult of Diabolos thought their mountain fortress was untouchable. But Minoru was no ordinary enemy. Standing amidst his tools and new gear, Umbra 03 hovering silently at his side, Minoru allowed himself a rare smile. "You wanted shadows? You've got them. Let's see how you handle the real thing." A few days before his infiltration, the hidden workshop's ceiling lights flickered faintly, its glow falling across a landscape of technological marvels and half-formed ideas. The air was thick with the sharp tang of solder, oil, and ozone, the unmistakable scent of innovation on the edge of madness. His world had become one of quiet hums, the rhythmic hiss of soldering irons, and the scratch of his pen against paper as he finalized the tools that would turn the tide against the cult of Diabolos. Sitting at the center of this controlled chaos, Minoru leaned back in his chair, the faint creak of metal filling the silence. Around him, the workshop seemed alive, his scattered prototypes practically vibrating with potential energy. "If I'm going to take on a mountain fortress," Minoru murmured, his sharp eyes surveying the tools before him, "I'll need more than just clever ideas. I need an edge they won't see coming." The grappling hook launcher. Minoru picked up the sleek grappling hook launcher resting on his bench. The alloy shimmered faintly under the light, smooth yet strong, a product of salvaged mining gear and painstaking craftsmanship. The retractable cable, woven from the experimental shadow thread, coiled perfectly within its compact housing. "Lightweight, silent, and strong enough to hold 3 times my weight," Minoru mused, testing the launcher's mechanism. The hook shot across the room with a satisfying thunk, embedding itself in a makeshift climbing wall. He gave the winch a soft tug, feeling its silent hum as it retracted. A grin crept across his face. "Thank you for the inspiration, Cult of Diabolos. I couldn't have done it without you." The stealth module. Next came the stealth module, an elegant solution to an otherwise infuriating problem. Standard invisibility tech was unreliable under pressure. Sudden movements, fluctuating conditions, and thermal scans all turned the invisible into the obvious. Not anymore. Minoru clipped the prototype device to his belt, its compact form belying its complexity. Borrowing from the stolen cult files, he'd fine-tuned the module to bend light and diffuse body heat, rendering him a ghost in the visible and infrared spectrum. He activated it, grabbing his old infrared scanner to test the results. On the scanner's display, Minoru was reduced to little more than a faint ripple in the air, a near-perfect camouflage. "Still not flawless," he muttered, frowning as he saw the field distort slightly with a quick movement. "But good enough. I just need to avoid UV sweeps and idiots with flashlights." The module's failsafe, a code spoof adapted from the cult's own alarms, offered an added safety net. If Minoru tripped a sensor, the device would delay its alert, buying him precious seconds. "Not bad," he said softly, turning the module off. "Not bad at all." Signal disruptor. The next tool sat proudly in his hand, a compact signal disruptor no larger than a deck of cards. It hummed faintly as Minoru flicked through its settings, each mode allowing him to disrupt specific frequencies. Cameras, radios, drones, even basic electrical systems. It was precise, adaptable, and above all, subtle. But Minoru had added a final trick. Embedded deep in its settings was a last resort EMP burst, a failsafe for when subtlety wasn't an option. He activated the test mode, watching as a nearby security camera, one of his older models, shuddered and died in a flicker of static. Just in case I need to bring the house down, he muttered with a smirk. EMP charges and shock traps. Minoru turned his attention to the compact EMP charges lined neatly in their casings. Small, portable, and devastating, they would fry circuits in a localized radius, perfect for bypassing high-tech security. Each charge came with adjustable timers and remote detonation for added versatility. Beside them lay his shock traps, small discs designed for crowd control. With a twist of their dial, they could release high-voltage bursts strong enough to incapacitate guards without permanent harm. Minoru tested one on his rigged mannequin, watching as it spasmed briefly before slumping. Enough to knock you down, not take you out, Minoru said, satisfied. Merciful. I should get bonus points for that. Magnetic climbing gloves. Lifting his upgraded gloves, Minoru admired the microelectromagnets housed in their palms and fingertips. He'd modified them with adjustable strength settings, allowing him to cling effortlessly to ferrous surfaces. To test them, he climbed a vertical metal sheet propped in the corner of his workshop. With each movement, the magnets clicked softly, releasing and engaging perfectly. He grinned, perched near the top. Arachnid man wishes he had these, he muttered before descending. Hollow Scrambler. The Hollow Scrambler was one of his favorites, an advanced gadget born from sleepless nights and stolen inspiration. Compact and subtle, it projected a looped holographic image of its surroundings, fooling cameras and sensors into seeing nothing. Setting up a small motion detector in his workshop, Minoru activated the scrambler. The detector's beam passed over the device without so much as a flicker of alarm. Minoru stepped into the dead zone, hidden perfectly from view. Now that's a game changer, he said, deactivating the device. The cyber-enhanced shadow suit. Finally, the crown jewel of his preparations, the shadow suit. Minoru stood before the sleek, black suit laid carefully across the workbench. On the surface, it looked unremarkable, a matte black uniform stitched with precise lines, but beneath the fabric lay innovation. The suit was lightweight and durable, its synthetic fibers resistant to bullets, blades, and the wear of rough terrain. Flexible alloy reinforcements protected key areas without compromising movement. Threaded through the fabric was a network of microcircuitry, all connected to Minoru's wrist-mounted interface, allowing him full control over his gear. The suit's energy core, a combination of cult power cells and, well, a little bit of smuggled depleted uranium, powered its reactive camouflage, enabling near invisibility in low-light environments. For emergencies, Minoru had integrated a microadrenaline injector, capable of boosting his reflexes and focus for a few critical moments. Draping the suit across his shoulders, Minoru let out a quiet breath as it synced to his interface with a faint hum. The workshop lights reflected off the fabric surface as it shimmered and adapted, merging with the shadows around him. This isn't just armor, he whispered, clenching his fists. This is who I am. Final preparations. Before leaving, Minoru placed Umbra 02 in a hidden compartment beneath his workbench, the drone's battered frame finally at rest. You've earned it, he said softly, patting its casing. Beside him, Umbra 03 whirred faintly, its system still charging. Minoru smirked at the drone's slow recharge rate. I'll handle this one myself. But next time you're pulling double duty, got it? Umbra 03 chirped faintly in what Minoru swore was a grudging agreement. With his gear packed and the shadow suit humming against his skin, Minoru turned toward the exit of the workshop. The mountain fortress loomed in his mind, a fortress built on secrets, guarded by shadows. But he was ready. Let them try to stop him. Infiltration begins, he whispered, stepping into the night. And the shadows will belong to me. 2 days later. The mountain fortress loomed in the darkness, a black silhouette etched against the star-streaked sky. Its jagged lines and towering walls cut into the rugged terrain like scars, glowing faintly with defensive systems that pulsed ominously in the night. If a fortress could look alive, this one did, its faint hum of power vibrating through the air, warning would-be intruders to keep their distance. Most would look at it and see the impossible. Minoru looked at it and saw opportunity. Crouched on a rocky outcrop just beyond the reach of its spotlights, Minoru's black tactical suit blended perfectly with the surrounding shadows. The suit's built-in heat suppression and reactive camouflage layered him in silence, hiding him from thermal scans and the naked eye alike. He was an invisible ghost, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The faint hum of his wrist-mounted interface broke the quiet, its screen glowing dimly against his forearm. The sleek display showed a rotating schematic of the mountain complex, overlaid with a map of patrolling guards, heat signatures and sensor grids, all data pulled from days of reconnaissance and analysis. Minoru muttered to himself, a habit he developed after too many hours spent alone. Security is tight. They've doubled the patrols, reinforced the outer sensors. But, he smirked, zooming in on a pattern of movement along the eastern perimeter. They're still slaves to routine. And routines can be broken. He glanced up at the night sky, irritation briefly flickering across his features as he exhaled through his nose. Umbra 03 would have made this easier. The drone's absence was an unwelcome thorn in his plans. While its upgraded systems had proven themselves in testing, Umbra 03's overnight charge hadn't completed in time for this operation. He couldn't risk waiting another day, not when the cult could tighten its security at any moment. He clenched his fists, feeling the faint hum of his shadow suit's microcircuitry. Guess I'll do this the old-fashioned way. Earlier, inspiration through necessity. The memory of his final creation, the wrist-mounted interface, lingered fresh in Minoru's mind, its development spurred on by a blend of frustration and inspiration. Days before, his workshop had been a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Tools clanged, screens flickered, and the air had buzzed with a sharp tension that only Minoru seemed to thrive in. In the center of it all, he'd sat slouched in his chair, staring at a crude, makeshift controller in his hands. This thing's garbage, he muttered, spinning it across the workbench with a flick of his wrist. It clattered uselessly against a pile of scorched wires. Clunky, slow, and useless in the middle of a fight. I need something better. His gaze drifted across his workshop, catching sight of a broken smartwatch, a relic he'd scavenged on a previous supply run. It sat forgotten on a shelf, its cracked screen reflecting the dim light of the workshop. Then it clicked. Minoru sat bolt upright. A wrist-mounted interface. The idea unfurled in his mind like a blueprint he'd always known. Compact, hands-free, and integrated into everything. From that moment he worked tirelessly, stripping the smartwatch down to its bare essentials. Its guts were laughably outdated, so Minoru replaced everything. Microprocessors, software, power supply, until it was reborn as a sleek, custom operating system optimized for his gear. The first prototype fit snugly onto a reinforced wristband, its interface glowing with a sharp, minimalist display. It was clean, efficient, and capable of commanding his drones, his suit, and every tactical tool in his arsenal. But Minoru wasn't satisfied with that alone. The Shadow Suit, his magnum opus of stealth technology, was next to be integrated. He connected the suit systems directly to the interface, threading microelectrodes that would interpret his body's subtle movements as commands. With a flick of his wrist he could engage stealth mode. With a clench of his fist, defensive measures activated seamlessly. No more clunky manual controls. His movements were his interface now. Let's see how you handle a neural link, Minoru muttered, attaching the final cable to the suit's processor. He could feel the hum of energy ripple faintly through the shadow suit as it synced to his thoughts. When he tested it, the results were exhilarating. The interface obeyed instantly, its holographic menus responding with flawless precision. Umbra 03 had risen from its dock, following Minoru's commands like an extension of his own body. He'd activated the shadow suit's reactive camouflage with a twist of his wrist, watching his form blur into near invisibility. And the best part? He'd integrated a holographic projector that allowed him to project 3D maps, schematics, and real-time data feeds from his gear. For the first time, he wasn't just operating in the shadows. He owned them. Perfect, Minoru had said that night, staring at the glowing interface strapped to his wrist. The light reflected off his sharp, determined eyes. In this world, tech is my magic. And this is just the beginning. Minoru exhaled, shaking himself from the memory. The fortress awaited. Its walls, cameras, and armed guards were nothing but obstacles to be overcome. He checked the display on his wrist-mounted interface. The time read 1:37 a.m., perfect. The guards' rotations had settled into a rhythm, the searchlights sweeping predictably across the ground below. Minoru rose from his crouch, adjusting the fit of his shadow suit. The microcircuitry thrummed faintly, syncing seamlessly with his interface. He activated stealth mode, the reactive camouflage shimmering to life as his form melted into the night. The wrist-mounted interface flickered, displaying a live schematic of the fortress's defenses. He marked weak points on the outer perimeter, blind spots in the cameras, gaps between patrol routes, and plotted his path in real time. "Entry point confirmed," Minoru whispered, his voice barely audible against the wind. His gloved fingers brushed against the grappling hook launcher strapped to his belt. He smirked. Time to knock. The first step was scaling the fortress's outer wall, a task most would call impossible. Minoru called it Wednesday. He took a running start, the gravel crunching softly underfoot before he leapt off the edge of the rocky outcrop. In a smooth motion, he raised the grappling hook launcher, his wrist twisting slightly to align the shot. Thunk. The hook embedded itself into the steel wall with pinpoint accuracy. The shadow thread cable unspooled soundlessly as Minoru swung forward, catching himself mid-air. His boots tapped against the cold steel as he climbed swiftly, the magnetic gloves engaging with a faint click as he ascended. At the top he paused, his breathing calm and measured. From this vantage point, the fortress stretched out below him, dimly lit corridors, clusters of patrolling guards, and rows of machinery humming faintly in the darkness. The cult's confidence in their impenetrable stronghold was obvious. Minoru allowed himself a quiet chuckle. "Overconfidence kills," he murmured, his fingers flicking across the wrist-mounted interface. A small holographic map projected briefly, highlighting his next targets. The night had swallowed him whole, and the cult had no idea what was coming. With his tools primed and his mind sharper than ever, Minoru descended into the heart of the fortress. Silent, invisible, relentless. The game had begun. The mountain complex. The fortress stood like a monstrous sentinel against the jagged cliffs, its walls a fusion of steel and stone carved into the mountain itself. Faint red lights blinked rhythmically along its perimeter, synchronized with the hum of automated turrets and the whir of motion-sensitive scanners. The cult of Diabolos had built this place to repel entire armies. But Minoru Kageno wasn't an army. He was a shadow. Crouched low on a rocky ledge that overlooked the fortress, Minoru blended seamlessly into the darkness. His shadow suit shimmered faintly as its camouflage adapted to the uneven terrain, erasing him from sight. His wrist-mounted interface pulsed softly, feeding him a live display of security feeds, heat signatures, and patrol patterns. Automated turrets, motion sensors, redundant guard rotations. Minoru whispered, narrowing his eyes. "They're not taking any chances." He unclipped a small hollow scrambler from his belt, its matte black casing cool to the touch. It was a device born of stolen cult technology and his ingenuity, something the cult themselves had unwittingly gifted him. Kneeling, Minoru planted it in the gravel near a sensor node. A low hum resonated as the device flickered to life, sending out a signal loop that tricked the perimeter's cameras and turrets into seeing only an empty expanse of dirt. The interface buzzed softly. Phase 1, complete. Minoru allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "You're blind now," he muttered, moving toward the towering outer wall with the grace of a predator. The fortress's outer walls were smooth steel, polished and devoid of footholds, reflecting faint glimmers of moonlight. Any ordinary intruder would have found the climb impossible. But Minoru wasn't ordinary. He flexed his gloved fingers, the faint hum of the magnetic climbing gloves syncing with his suit's interface. The microelectromagnets engaged with a click, locking his hands to the steel surface. Step by step he began the ascent. Halfway up, Minoru's wrist interface buzzed, a soft vibration against his arm. The screen displayed two glowing dots moving at the wall's base. Guards. Patrol. 2 of them. 30 seconds, he murmured, freezing in place. His movement stilled entirely, his form blending into the wall as the shadow suit's reactive camouflage adjusted to the steel. The guards' voices carried faintly on the wind as they passed below, their conversation mundane and lazy, complaints about shift rotations, cold meals, and unending protocols. Minoru smirked. Overconfidence, he thought. It'll get you every time. When their footsteps faded into the distance, he resumed his climb. Reaching the top of the wall, Minoru hoisted himself over, landing silently on the inner walkway. Spotlights swept the ground below, but the hollow scrambler's field held steady, creating a blind zone he could maneuver through. Before him lay an access vent embedded in the wall. Minoru unclipped the wrist-mounted laser cutter, its small nozzle glowing faintly as it ignited. The device hissed quietly as it cut through the grate, sparks flickering in short bursts. "Last use," he muttered, watching the diode glow too brightly before burning out. I need a better power source. Something that won't overload the diode, or maybe better diodes. With the grate loosened, he slipped into the vent and pulled it back into place. The narrow duct rattled faintly as he crawled forward, his wrist interface quietly mapping the fortress's interior in real time. A pulsating red dot highlighted his destination, the central lab where the cult's experiments were underway. The vent eventually opened into a cavernous chamber. Minoru peered through the slats, his eyes narrowing at the sight below. The room was filled with rows of glass tanks, each holding humanoid figures suspended in pulsing green liquid. Their bodies were human, and yet not. Disturbing mutations were evident, animalistic features emerging from the otherwise human frames. Feline ears, canine tails, elongated limbs. Some looked serene as if asleep. Others twitched faintly, their malformed fingers curling against the glass. Minoru's jaw tightened. They're further along than I thought. The sight fueled his resolve, but there was nothing he could do for them now. He pushed forward, crawling through the vents until he reached a quieter, isolated room, a research lab. Below him, a senior scientist barked orders at a cadre of subordinates. A massive server pulsed softly in the center of the room, its cables snaking outward like roots from a monstrous tree. Minoru dropped silently from the vent, landing behind a stack of crates. From his belt, he retrieved the signal disruptor, a cylindrical device he'd fine-tuned for moments like this. He slipped it onto a nearby console and activated it. The server room flickered. Screens glitched, lights dimmed, and the soft hum of machinery faltered. What's happening? One of the scientists shouted, panic spreading like wildfire. Minoru moved swiftly through the confusion. His hands flew across the server's control terminal, his interface syncing instantly. Data began to pour in, schematics, encrypted reports, personnel files, everything the cult of Diabolos had buried deep in their network. Project Epsilon, subject viability test successful. Operation Aurora, final preparations underway. Minoru's eyes darkened as he scrolled through the files. They're not just experimenting. They're building an army, he murmured, copying everything to his wrist interface. Satisfied, he planted EMP charges at key points around the server. Time to go. As Minoru moved for the door, the alarms blared. Red lights flared, casting an ominous glow across the lab. Guards stormed into the halls, their voices shouting orders. Minoru stayed calm. He activated shock traps, tossing the small discs onto the floor behind him. The first wave of guards ran directly into the traps. Electric currents burst outward, sending them convulsing to the ground. Should have watched your step, Minoru muttered, sprinting down the corridor. Reaching the outer wall, he deployed his grappling hook. The motorized winch hissed as it yanked him upward with breathtaking speed. He vaulted over the wall just as guards appeared below, their weapons firing bursts of gunfire too late to hit their mark. From his rocky perch outside the fortress, Minoru glanced back. He raised his wrist, his finger hovering over the EMP detonator. Good night, he whispered, pressing the button. The fortress erupted with a cascade of sparks and explosions. Power conduits burst, machines sputtered, and darkness swallowed the entire facility. Minoru sat at his workbench, surrounded by monitors glowing faintly with stolen data. The files painted a grim picture. Project Epsilon was only a piece of the puzzle. The cult's resources were immense, their plans stretching far beyond anything Minoru had anticipated. He glanced at the battered frame of Umbra 02, resting in a crate on the shelf, a silent reminder of the battles already fought. Across the room, Umbra 03 hummed quietly on its charging dock, readying itself for whatever came next. Minoru leaned back in his chair, the faint glow of the monitors reflecting in his sharp eyes. They think the shadows are theirs, he said softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But the shadows belong to me. His gaze shifted to the files on his screen. Operation Aurora, the name loomed like a specter, promising greater challenges ahead. And so does the future, Minoru finished, the words a quiet vow. The game was far from over. It had only just begun. Extra chapter, the aftermath. The mountain fortress was a husk of its former self. Flames licked at the edges of shattered walls, and the acrid stench of burnt circuitry filled the air. Smoke billowed into the night sky, carried by the cold mountain winds, as the remnants of the facility lay in ruin. Agents and personnel scrambled to contain the damage, extinguishing fires and salvaging whatever they could. At the heart of the chaos stood Agent Olivier, her expression a stoic mask as she observed the disarray. Her presence alone demanded silence, the weight of her authority pressing down on those around her. A technician rushed forward, his face pale and sweat-drenched. "Ma'am, the central lab, it's a total loss." Olivier's eyes narrowed, a subtle flicker of fury behind her otherwise calm demeanor. "Clarify," she said, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the smoke-filled air. The technician swallowed hard, shifting nervously as he held his datapad in trembling hands. The intruder, they targeted the critical systems directly. The resulting explosions ignited flammable materials and storage, and it triggered a chain reaction. The entire complex couldn't handle the strain. It started collapsing from within. We had to evacuate. "The data?" Olivier asked, her tone dangerous. "All critical files and prototypes are destroyed, ma'am," the technician stammered. What wasn't obliterated by the explosions was fried by the EMP bursts. Surveillance footage and security logs were scrambled beyond recovery. Olivier's fingers tightened around the hilt of her blade, a subtle gesture, but one that sent a chill through the technician. "So you're telling me," she said, voice steady but laced with steel, "that we have nothing? No evidence, no data, and no trace of the intruder." It's like they were never here," the technician whispered. Olivier turned away sharply, her plated jacket billowing behind her as she strode toward the remains of the command center. Her boots echoed ominously against the cracked concrete floor, each step deliberate. In her mind, one name echoed with every step: Kageno. She exhaled. Perhaps there was another super slippery agent of chaos trying to mess with the cult? Unlikely. Facing another section of the ruined complex, Olivier made her way to what counted as the command center for the complex, hoping for better news. The command center was dimly lit, the remaining analysts and officers working frantically to salvage what little remained. Static-filled screens flickered on the walls, feeding corrupted data and fragmented logs. Olivier entered the room like a cold wind, her presence silencing the frantic murmurs. "Report," Olivier commanded, her tone brooking no argument. A younger analyst, clearly overwhelmed by the situation, hesitated before speaking. "We managed to recover fragments of the database, ma'am. They accessed files on multiple projects, including lab schematics, personnel logs, and..." He paused, visibly shaking. "And?" Olivier pressed, her voice low and dangerous. The analyst swallowed and pointed to his screen. "Project Epsilon's core files, ma'am. It looks like they knew exactly what to take." Olivier's sharp eyes narrowed, her hand flexing faintly at her side. Project Epsilon. One of the cult's most secretive undertakings. A project buried so deep within their organization that only the highest-ranking members even knew of its existence. If Kageno had accessed those files. "Are you certain?" Olivier asked, her voice cold. "Yes, ma'am," the analyst said, pulling up the corrupted remnants of the database. Among the static and shattered code, one image flickered onto the screen, a blueprint of a massive containment unit labeled Prototype Neural Matrix. Olivier's stomach tightened. The neural matrix, the theoretical cornerstone of Project Epsilon, was designed to control the cult's most dangerous assets, their experiments in biological and technological fusion. If Kageno possessed this information, it wasn't just their projects at risk. It was their entire foundation. Far from the ruins of the mountain fortress, Minoru leaned casually against a gnarled tree in a secluded forest clearing. The faint glow of his wrist-mounted interface illuminated the darkness, the stolen files splayed out in streams of encrypted data. Despite his calm exterior, his mind worked like a machine, processing each piece of intel with surgical precision. "Project Epsilon," he murmured, scrolling through schematics and logs that had survived the chaos of the escape. The fragmented files revealed glimpses of something enormous, a sprawling network of labs, containment units, and bioengineering protocols. But the true centerpiece of the operation appeared again and again. Prototype Neural Matrix. Minoru tapped the display, bringing up a list of personnel linked to Project Epsilon. Most names were unremarkable: engineers, researchers, security officers. But one name stood out like a beacon amidst the rubble. Olivier. Minoru's lips curved into a faint smile. "So, you're not just some knife for hire," he murmured. "You're deep in this." He closed the projection with a tap of his wrist. The cult of Diabolos had been meticulous in hiding their operations, but the cracks were beginning to show. "You're running out of places to hide," Minoru whispered into the night. He disappeared into the shadows. No trace left behind. Back in the smoldering ruins of the mountain fortress, Olivier paced the shattered command center. Analysts worked feverishly to piece together any remaining fragments of their systems, but the scale of the destruction was undeniable. The intruder had not just sabotaged them, he had humiliated them. A senior officer stepped forward, his uniform dusted with ash. "Ma'am, if I may, why would someone target Project Epsilon? It's not even operational yet." Olivier stopped mid-stride, turning to face him. Her eyes were like ice. "Because he isn't just someone," she replied, her voice quiet but carrying. "He's an anomaly. He knows things no one outside the cult should know." Her gaze flicked toward the monitors as an alert blared. One of the analysts scrambled to bring up a live feed. The room fell silent as the screen displayed a convoy under attack. Security personnel were in disarray, their weapons useless against a single black figure dismantling the defenses with ruthless precision. The figure moved like liquid shadow, using gadgets and tools that defied expectation. Olivier's hand tightened around the hilt of her blade. "Kageno," she whispered. The feed cut out, static crackling ominously in its place. One of the analysts spoke up, his voice shaky. "Ma'am, there's something else. In the files the intruder stole, we found an encrypted message buried deep in the Epsilon data." Olivier turned sharply. "What message?" The analyst pulled it up on the screen. Amid the corrupted fragments, a single line of text emerged. "The truth lies beneath the ruins." The word sent a ripple of unease through the room. The ruins were a place shrouded in myth and fear, a site abandoned long ago after an experiment had gone catastrophically wrong. Even the cult avoided it. Olivier's expression darkened. "Kageno knows. Prepare a team," she ordered, her voice firm and final. "We're going to the ruins. And this time we'll finish what he started." The forest was unnervingly silent, its usual chorus of rustling leaves and chirping insects strangely absent, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. Moonlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy above, its pale glow reduced to fractured beams that cast jagged, shifting shadows across the forest floor. Minoru crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. His wrist-mounted interface glowed faintly, illuminating his focused expression as he scanned the terrain ahead. Beside him, the faint hum of Umbra 03's propulsion system hovered like an unspoken question, its presence both reassuring and ominous. Ahead, his destination loomed, a crumbling ruin swallowed by the wilderness. The once imposing structure of metal and stone now lay in the final stages of decay, its dignity stolen by time and neglect. Half-collapsed walls bore the blackened scars of an ancient conflict, while tendrils of ivy and gnarled vines wormed their way through shattered windows and fractured stone. Nature had claimed the facility as its own, weaving a cloak of green and shadow around its broken frame. To Minoru, it resembled a relic from a forgotten world, a set piece in some abandoned dystopian epic, long forsaken by its creators. The ruins were the perfect place for the cult of Diabolos to bury their secrets. According to the fragmented data Minoru had decrypted, this forsaken site held the key to uncovering the truth behind Project Epsilon, and, perhaps, to unraveling the enigma of Aurora. The name lingered in his thoughts like a ghost, stirring more questions than answers. "Umbra 03 initiate scan," Minoru whispered, his voice barely audible over the drone of cicadas that had begun to stir again, a reluctant reminder that life still pulsed in this foreboding place. The drone's lights blinked in silent acknowledgement before it floated ahead, a dark silhouette against the pale shafts of moonlight. A faint hum followed as Umbra 03 deployed its scanning grid. Thin beams of blue light rippled outward, projecting an intricate web over the ruins, like a spider spinning a delicate, methodical trap. Minoru's wrist interface buzzed softly as data streamed in, lighting up with a rapidly evolving schematic. Potential entry points glowed on the map, their pathways marked in sharp digital clarity. He noted the locations of collapsed passages, dead ends, and structurally unstable areas. His heart quickened as the drone's mapping extended deeper into the ruins' labyrinthine interior. Somewhere within the bowels of this forgotten facility lay the answers he sought, and the danger waiting to keep them buried. Minoru slipped through a partially open door, its corroded metal hinges shrieking in protest, the sound stabbing through the oppressive silence. The air inside was thick and damp, suffused with the cloying scent of decay and rusted metal. Each breath felt heavy, the stale atmosphere clinging to his throat. Wires dangled like lifeless vines from the cracked ceiling, swaying slightly in an unseen draft. Shattered monitors lined the walls, their screens scorched and blackened, relics of an age when this place had pulsed with a sinister purpose. "Looks clear," Minoru muttered, though the uneasy weight in his chest told him otherwise. Umbra 03's soft hum dipped as its lights flickered, signaling an all clear. It hovered just behind him, a vigilant shadow ready to respond to the slightest anomaly. The ruin's depths pulsed with a silence that felt alive, as though the walls themselves were breathing, watching. Minoru advanced cautiously, his footsteps soundless against the debris-strewn floor. His upgraded suit moved with a fluid precision, its adaptive plating contouring perfectly to his body while amplifying his agility. The new servos at the joints absorbed every subtle shift in movement, letting him glide through the darkness like a shadow. After the last mission, he'd fine-tuned the suit systems, integrating mobility protocols that made traversal effortless. He could scale walls in silence, vault over obstacles with ease, and maintain balance on uneven terrain. Every sensor hummed with precision, feeding him detailed environmental data, temperature shifts, air pressure anomalies, and faint traces of something unnatural in the atmosphere. Umbra 03 glided just above his shoulder, its circular form rotating slowly as it cast soft beams of light through the darkness. The drone's systems clicked and whirred, detecting structural irregularities, scanning for movement, and mapping the twisted labyrinth. Though rudimentary in its intelligence, Umbra 03 was an irreplaceable partner, silently threading a digital lifeline through this maze of decay and secrets. Minoru's expression was hard, unreadable, but his mind worked furiously. These weren't simple ruins, they were a laboratory. A tomb of forgotten technology and the grotesque remnants of ambition gone horribly awry. The cult of Diabolos hadn't merely conducted experiments here, they'd played with forces they could not control. Umbra 03, focus scans on any remaining data nodes, he ordered, his voice low, almost swallowed by the dark. The drone blinked and chirped, darting forward to search for active terminals amid the rubble. Minoru followed cautiously, his gaze scanning every shadow, every crevice where danger might wait. The twisted remains of machinery loomed like skeletal husks, their functions long dead but their forms eerily preserved. Some devices were incomprehensible, a fusion of science and something far older, arcane symbols etched into metal, glowing faintly even now. He paused as his boots hit solid stone at the threshold of a vast corridor. At its end stood a massive door. Unlike the corroded panels he'd passed, this one was pristine, untouched by the decay that consumed the rest of the ruin. Its surface gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, adorned with strange, glowing runes that pulsed softly as if alive. Minoru's gaze narrowed. This has to be it. The decrypted files had mentioned a core, a central chamber where the cult's secrets converged. This door was no mere entrance, it was a gate to something far worse. His wrist interface buzzed and Umbra 03 floated closer, scanning the door's locking mechanism. It's not mechanical, Minoru murmured, eyes flitting between the runes and the faint readings on his interface. It's something else. Umbra 03 chirped, signaling the lock's complexity, layers of encryption woven into both hardware and energy fields. Whatever lay beyond was meant to stay buried. Override it manually, Minoru said, drawing a slim multi-tool from his belt. He knelt beside the door, prying open a recessed panel to expose a tangled mass of wires, circuits, and crystalline nodes that pulsed faintly with energy. His fingers moved with practiced precision, bypassing traditional fail-safes while rerouting power around the defensive protocols. The interface flickered warnings of interference, but Minoru ignored them, his upgraded suit stabilizers compensating for the awkward angle as he worked. Minutes crawled by, the silence punctuated only by his steady breathing and the soft clicks of his tools. Finally, the door shuddered, a low groan reverberating through the corridor as it slid open. The sound was almost reluctant, as though the ruin itself resisted his entry. Beyond the door lay a massive chamber bathed in ethereal blue light. Minoru rose, his heart pounding as his eyes adjusted to the eerie glow. At the chamber's center stood a colossal cylindrical device. Its surface was smooth, metallic, and etched with glowing runes that spiraled like veins across its surface. The structure thrummed faintly, an unnatural resonance that vibrated in his bones. It looked like a containment unit, but what it held, or once held, was anyone's guess. Umbra 03 interface with the terminal, Minoru instructed, gesturing toward a nearby console built into the floor. The drone glided to the console, extending a small data port that hissed as it made contact. The screen stuttered to life, its cracked surface flickering with lines of corrupted code. Minoru's wrist interface mirrored the output, decrypting fragments of the terminal's data. Lines of text scrolled, chilling in their simplicity. Entry 402, Subject Aurora. Hybridization process incomplete. Results unstable. Further containment required. Entry 478. Energy signature classified as anomalous. Capable of biological imprinting. Class: Danger Extremis. Minoru's breath caught as the words burned into his mind. Aurora, he whispered, the name carrying a weight he could not define. Biological imprinting? What did they create? Umbra 03 chirped, its light flickering erratically. On his interface, a warning flashed. Energy signature detected. Proximity increasing. From the darkness beyond the containment unit came a low, resonant hum. Minoru turned, his muscles tensing, his enhanced suit responding instantly, readying him for whatever lay ahead. The chamber was no longer silent. Something had awoken. Minoru's brow furrowed as he reread the cryptic words scrolling across his wrist interface. Biological imprinting. Hybridization incomplete. His mind buzzed with questions. Was Aurora an experiment that had spiraled out of control? And if so, what had the cult of Diabolos hoped to achieve? A weapon? A god? His gaze lifted as he stepped cautiously further into the chamber, his breath faltering at the grotesque sight before him. The room was immense, almost cathedral-like, its ceiling stretching into a shroud of shadows where his light could not reach. But dominating its center, suspended in a massive cylindrical containment tube, was an arm. A colossal appendage, part flesh, part gleaming metal, chained to the chamber floor and ceiling as though the ruin itself strained to hold it back. The grotesque limb pulsed faintly with a sickly glow, veins of light snaking along the hybrid tissue like molten lava. Each finger was monstrous, the digits curled inward, as thick as three men standing shoulder to shoulder. Ancient chains laced with glowing runes bound the arm, crackling faintly with energy, holding it in place, though their tremors made it clear they strained against something far greater. The liquid encasing the appendage wasn't water. It was thicker, darker, and faintly alive, rippling with each slow pulse emanating from the monstrous arm. Minoru's stomach turned as his analytical mind tried to process what he was seeing. What the hell did they create here? Then he saw her. Near the base of the containment tube, projected from a pedestal, was the flickering image of a woman. Her form glowed faintly like a dying hologram, translucent yet unervingly vivid. She was delicate, almost ethereal, but something in her presence was profoundly wrong. Her beauty was haunting, her eyes hollow pools of sorrow and barely contained rage. Aurora. Minoru whispered, recognizing her face from the fragmented files. The hologram turned toward him, her gaze locking onto his. Her lips moved, her voice soft yet resonant, echoing through the cavernous chamber. You've come. Minoru instinctively gripped his tools, his suit system scanning for threats. Who or what are you? Aurora tilted her head, a flicker of a sad, brittle smile crossing her face. I was human once. Now, I am what they made me, a mistake. A curse. Minoru's eyes shifted back to the massive arm. This thing. Was it part of you? She nodded slowly, the faint light of the projection shimmering as though with emotion. A fragment of what I became. They sought to harness my power to make me a weapon. But even they couldn't control what they unlocked. Their ambition blinded them, and their arrogance destroyed them. Minoru stepped closer to the pedestal, his every nerve on edge. He'd seen the cult's atrocities before, remnants of experiments that defied reason. But this was something different. This was alive. Aurora's gaze softened as she studied him, her expression almost wistful. You're not like them. No, Minoru said flatly, his voice steady. I destroy what they leave behind. Her lips curled into the faintest smile, a flicker of hope, fragile yet defiant. Then perhaps, you can succeed where others failed. Before he could respond, the chamber trembled. The chains around the monstrous arm flared brighter, runes surging with energy as the air thickened and hummed with raw power. Umbra 03 retreat. Minoru barked, turning sharply. But the drone faltered, its lights flickering erratically, systems scrambled by the overwhelming surge of energy. Aurora's projection extended a hand toward him, desperation flashing in her eyes. I'll give you what I can. Take it. Use it. End this nightmare. The pedestal exploded with light. A torrent of energy erupted from it, lancing into Minoru like a lightning strike. He staggered, his body arching backward as his systems went haywire. Alarms blaring in his ears, his interface flashing red with critical errors. Pain tore through him, sharp and searing. His muscles spasmed, veins burning as if molten fire coursed through them. He fell to his knees, hands clawing at the ground as the energy surged relentlessly. Through the haze of agony, Aurora's voice whispered, soft, almost pleading. You're strong, stronger than they were. Don't let this break you. His vision swam with blinding light, his thoughts fracturing under the onslaught. But beneath the pain he felt it, power. Raw, unrelenting, alien power coiling through his body like a serpent awakening from slumber. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the torrent ceased. The room plunged back into silence. Aurora's projection was gone. The massive arm hung limply in its chains, the sickly glow extinguished as though the energy sustaining it had been drained. Minoru slumped forward, his breaths ragged and uneven, sweat dripping from his brow. His suit's diagnostics flashed warnings, but no lasting damage appeared, at least not to the systems. His body, however, felt different. His senses sharper, his reflexes heightened, his limbs alive with an alien strength that both exhilarated and terrified him. Umbra 03, Minoru croaked, staggering to his feet. The drone emitted a high-pitched whine, deploying an EMP burst in a futile attempt to stabilize the remaining energy. Sparks crackled, but the field had already dissipated. From somewhere in the darkness, Aurora's voice lingered, an echo carved into the walls. You are different, not like the others. Perhaps you will survive. Minoru ran a hand across his face, steadying his breath as he studied his trembling hands. The faint pulse of something unnatural lingered beneath his skin, and for the first time in years, he felt the edges of uncertainty claw at him. Great, he muttered, forcing himself upright, his tone a mix of frustration and dry humor. I just got cursed by a ghost. Umbra 03 emitted a quick succession of lights, signaling that the data transfer was complete. Minoru glanced back at the containment tube, the colossal arm looming like a silent warning. Whatever the cult had created here wasn't over, not yet. Let's go, he said, his voice firm as he turned toward the exit. The hum of his suit's servos echoed softly through the chamber as he moved, his pace steady despite the lingering unease. As he disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, the faint traces of Aurora's presence still lingered in the air, a ghost watching over the nightmare she had become. Location, unknown. Affiliation, Cult of Diabolos. Time, unknown, approximately 1 week after the mountain complex raid. Olivier knelt at the center of the shadowy chamber, her polished black uniform glinting faintly under the cold, pulsing light of the massive crystal suspended overhead. Around her loomed the inner circle, the cult of Diabolos' most powerful and secretive leaders. Each figure was shrouded in intricately designed robes, their faces hidden beneath ornate masks that gleamed like bone, silver, and obsidian. They were faceless, voiceless shadows brought to life only by the distorted echoes of their voices, carried by unseen magic and technology. You failed, Olivier, rumbled the elders seated at the head of the assembly. Their voice carried a cruel weight, like steel dragged across stone. The mountain fortress was an embarrassment. A single intruder infiltrated our ranks, breached our defenses, sowed chaos, and escaped with vital intelligence. One man. Olivier's head bowed lower, her fists tightening against her knees. The accusation burned, but she let none of the fire escape her expression. I accept full responsibility, Elder. I miscalculated his resourcefulness and audacity. It will not happen again. It cannot happen again, another voice hissed from Olivier's left, higher-pitched and venomous. This so-called Kageno has struck at the foundation of our operations twice. First, our backup server location. Then, the mountain complex, one of our most critical research facilities. He destroyed projects decades in the making. Do you grasp what this means, Blade? Yes, Olivier replied, her voice tight and measured. I understand the severity of the situation. The crystal's light intensified, bathing her in its cold glow. Heat prickled at her back, not from the crystal itself, but from the sheer pressure of their collective judgment. You are the blade of the cult, the head elder continued, their words punctuated by the sharp crackle of magic humming through the room. You were forged to cut down all who oppose us. If you cannot deliver results, then perhaps you are no longer worthy of the title. Her head snapped up slightly, jaw set and eyes burning with steely resolve. I will rectify this failure, she said, rising to her full height. The movement was deliberate, not defiant but unshakably confident. Give me the resources I require and I will eliminate Kageno. Permanently. The chamber fell into a heavy silence. Olivier held her ground, her gaze unyielding. Finally, after a long pause, the elder spoke again. Very well. Their voice echoed like a hammer striking iron. You will lead the next strike. We have located one of his workshops. Destroy it. And this time, Olivier, do not return empty-handed. Find him. Erase him. Olivier inclined her head in a sharp, curt bow. It will be done. The crystal dimmed, and the voices of the inner circle fell silent. The meeting was over, but the weight of her task settled over Olivier like a lead shroud. Olivier's boots struck the polished floors of the cult's sprawling fortress with rhythmic precision as she strode purposefully through its corridors. Around her, the inner sanctum buzzed with activity. Acolytes moved in seamless synchrony, their black robes sweeping behind them as they transported data crystals, alchemical components, and freshly sharpened weapons. The cult was a machine, relentless and unyielding, and Olivier was its blade. She passed massive laboratories where arcane and scientific horrors alike were birthed, cages where monstrosities snarled behind bars, tubes filled with unidentifiable fluids and half-formed experiments. Beyond them lay the barracks, where recruits shouted chants in unison as they trained tirelessly, their movements honed to deadly precision. Her destination was the armory, a cathedral of death where the cult stored its most advanced weaponry. The doors slid open with a hiss as she entered, the air thick with the sharp tang of oiled metal and charged energy. Rows of racks stretched into the shadows, lined with weapons that were equal parts arcane and technological. Blades forged with magic, firearms enhanced to tear through armor, and experimental tools built to defy nature itself. At the center of the room, under a cold, sterile spotlight, stood a masterpiece of cult engineering. "The Vanguard frame," said the armory's keeper, a wiry man with sharp eyes and fingers stained with grease. He hovered near the prototype like a worshipper before an idol. "Our finest combat suit. Fresh from the forges." Olivier approached the armor, her expression unreadable. It stood tall and imposing, its jet-black plating traced with faint lines of glowing circuitry that pulsed like veins beneath the surface. The sleek design promised both grace and lethality. "State-of-the-art," the keeper continued, his voice brimming with pride. "Reinforced plating, impervious to conventional ballistics. Adaptive shielding to withstand explosive concussions and directed energy. Enhanced strength for devastating close-quarters combat." Her fingers brushed across the armor's surface, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath. "And limitations?" "Very few," the keeper admitted. "The power core is its only real weakness. Sustained shocks or direct strikes to the chest could destabilize the shielding, leading to a temporary shutdown. But unless you're struck repeatedly by a lightning storm, it's unlikely." Olivier's mouth twitched slightly, a ghost of a smile. "Noted." She stepped into the Vanguard frame, the armor molding to her form with a series of soft clicks and hisses. The suit systems synced to her body with a hum of activation, displays flickering to life across her visor. It was a perfect fusion of cult ingenuity, ancient runes etched into modern plating, magic integrated seamlessly with machine. "The suit's interface will link you directly to our surveillance network," the keeper added. "You'll have live predictive mapping of his movements as long as he remains in range." "Good," Olivier replied, the word clipped as she tested the suit's movements. It responded instantly, amplifying her natural agility and strength. She moved as though she were unburdened, a predator clad in black steel. She approached a rack and selected her weapon, a long, curved blade. Its edge shimmered faintly with enchantments, the runes along its hilt glowing in tandem with the Vanguard frame. It was a weapon worthy of the cult's blade. As Olivier exited the armory, her armored footsteps echoed down the corridor. A squad of elite operatives fell into step behind her, silent and disciplined, their presence acknowledged only by a brief flick of her visor. "This time," she murmured under her breath, her voice carrying an edge as sharp as her blade, "he won't escape." The workshop stood unassuming in a forgotten corner of the industrial zone, indistinguishable from the derelict warehouses and shuttered factories surrounding it. Its cracked walls and rust-streaked facade whispered of abandonment, but Olivier wasn't fooled. Appearances meant nothing. Her operatives' reports told a different story: irregular power consumption, untraceable deliveries, fleeting shadows at odd hours. Signs of life. Signs of him. Olivier stood at the head of her squad, her Vanguard frame humming faintly with readiness. The lenses of her helmet glowed softly as she assessed the target ahead, the faint pulse of her armor systems feeding her real-time data. "This is it," she murmured to herself before her voice sharpened. "Standard breach. Minimize collateral damage. I want him alive if possible." The squad moved with practiced precision, breaking into smaller teams as they took positions around the building. Silence stretched as they waited, coiled like a steel spring ready to snap. Olivier raised her hand, fingers twitching slightly before she dropped it in a cutting motion. "Go." Explosive charges detonated with surgical force, shattering reinforced doors and punctuating the stillness with concussive fury. Smoke grenades followed, hissing as they filled the workshop's interior with choking plumes of synthetic haze. The assault was a mechanical ballet, silent operatives flowing forward like black shadows under Olivier's command. Resistance met them immediately. Automated turrets spat non-lethal rounds, their barrels snapping toward the intruders with mechanical precision. The air filled with the hiss of tear gas canisters and the whip of steel nets as traps deployed in quick succession. A chaotic barrage designed to stall, not kill. Olivier pressed forward undeterred, her focus absolute. The vanguard frame moved with her, amplifying her speed and grace as her blade, razor-sharp and shimmering with arcane power, sliced through nets and crippled turret systems and fluid arcs. Her squad dismantled the defenses methodically, disabling triggers and neutralizing machinery with practiced efficiency. And yet, Olivier's frustration simmered beneath her cold exterior. The workshop revealed itself as a labyrinth of jerry-rigged machinery and improvised defenses, a maze cobbled together from scrap metal and ingenuity. For all its crudity, it was annoyingly effective at soaking up time and resources. Every step forward felt like cutting through a web, strands tangling and slowing her relentless advance. "Clear the rear," she barked over comms, her voice clipped but steady. "Teams 2 and 3, sweep the lower levels." The squad acknowledged her orders with clicks over their comms, fanning out to dismantle the last of the resistance. Smoke still lingered, curling like restless phantoms through the ruin of the workshop. Finally, silence fell. The defenses were gone, traps disarmed, turrets gutted, the haze clearing to reveal the cavernous space in its entirety. Olivier stalked forward, boots striking the ground with deliberate force, her gaze sweeping the room. The place was a mess of workbenches covered in half-finished devices, spare parts scattered across the floor like discarded bones. But the one thing that mattered, the man who mattered, was absent. Minoru. Her target. Her prize. Gone. Olivier's fingers curled into fists, the armored plates of her gauntlets creaking under the strain. Rage boiled within her, sharp and white-hot. Where was he? She spun on her heel, her gaze sweeping the room with the precision of a hawk searching for prey. The absence of Minoru gnawed at her, a bitter mockery of her meticulous planning. Her operatives had destroyed his defenses, dismantled his pathetic little fortress, and yet he had slipped through her grasp again. Her thoughts raced. He didn't have time. Creating technology as advanced as what he used at the mountain site wasn't a quick endeavor. It required resources, materials, power, knowledge. She'd counted on that, on his inability to rebuild in so short a time. Did he retreat to his home? Is he salvaging his stockpile, preparing new tools to strike us again? No, she snarled under her breath, her pulse pounding. No, 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 and no. She would not allow him another victory. She would not suffer the indignity of another failure. Retreat. Olivier barked, her voice sharp as a blade. This place is a decoy. He's at his main base of operations. Her squad didn't falter. They were the cult's elite, masters of rapid redeployment and discipline drilled to the point of instinct. Tools vanished into packs, weapons reloaded, and operatives fell into formation behind her without hesitation. Olivier strode toward the exit, her blade still humming softly in her hand. Every motion was calculated, every step fueled by unyielding resolve. "We move now," she commanded. "Prepare for another assault." The operatives fell in line, their silence unbroken as they marched out into the night. The vanguard frame shifted seamlessly with Olivier's movements, its systems alive with anticipation. The game was no longer about patience or planning. The time for subtlety had passed. Her jaw tightened as her visor displayed coordinates for their next target. "This ends now." "He won't escape again," she whispered, her voice a promise to herself. Outside, the industrial zone lay still beneath the cold glow of distant streetlights, unaware of the storm that had passed through, or the one that was coming next. Olivier stood atop a windswept hill, her silhouette sharp against the backdrop of the inferno below. The house, what had once been his house, burned with a vicious hunger, flames clawing upward to paint the night sky in shades of crimson and gold. Embers spiraled like dying stars, carried away on the breeze as the structure crumbled inward with a hollow groan. It was an immaculate operation. Precision strikes had ruptured the natural gas lines, masking the destruction as a tragic accident. No civilians harmed, no loose ends, just ashes where both a home and a hidden workshop had once stood. The council's orders had been explicit. Obliterate everything tied to the threat and make it unambiguous. This was a message. Olivier's expression remained a mask of cold indifference as she activated her communicator, a sleek, near-invisible device embedded in her glove. "Primary target's residence is neutralized," she reported, her voice steady. "No signs of resistance or presence at the site." The reply came a heartbeat later, the attendant's voice emotionless and clipped. "Understood. Proceed with Phase 2. Eliminate the threat." "Yes. Understood." The channel clicked off and Olivier turned sharply toward her team. They were waiting, silent and motionless. On the hillside behind her, a squad of elite operatives clad in the cult's vanguard combat suits. Their black armor blended seamlessly with the shadows, faint circuitry glowing along their plates like veins of molten power. "Move out," Olivier ordered, her tone leaving no room for question. The squad obeyed as one, breaking formation and descending the hill with eerie precision. And yet, as Olivier followed, her steps calculated and soundless, a faint unease prickled at the edges of her thoughts. Kageno. He wasn't the type to be caught off guard. The council called him a nuisance, a rogue operator, but Olivier had seen his work firsthand. He was meticulous to the point of obsession, always 3 steps ahead of his enemies. If he wasn't at either of the known locations, then there was only one possibility left. The ruins. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It made sense. If Minoru had anticipated an assault, and he would have fallback plans, contingencies, hidden stashes of equipment ready for deployment. There was no way someone of his skill would leave anything to chance. Privately, she admitted there was something admirable about his relentlessness, his refusal to leave loose ends. The cult should have been doing the same, Olivier thought bitterly. For all their centuries of dominance, the cult of Diabolos had grown complacent. Arrogant. Shadows made lazy by centuries of rule. Kageno's insurgency was proof of their cracks. The ruins were her next and final stop. If she could end this there, the council would have their justice and Olivier would reclaim her honor. Not far from the ruins, Olivier stood at the head of her strike team once more. Smoke and ash still clung to the vanguard frame, faint wisps curling from the scorched plating, ghosts of their earlier assault on Minoru's home and the backup workshop. Swift, merciless, yet utterly unsatisfying. They had reduced everything to rubble and still come away empty-handed. But now they were close. "Move in," Olivier commanded. Her voice cut through the night air like a blade, cold, precise, and devoid of emotion. The operatives surged forward, their movements synchronized, silent as shadows and deadly as a pack of wolves. Olivier followed at their center, her blade resting lightly against her armor. Every step she took was measured, yet her mind raced with cold calculation. If Minoru had reached Aurora first, if he had somehow gained access to the anomaly buried within the ruins, the implications were unthinkable. The council had warned her of Aurora's nature, a hybrid of incomprehensible power, half experiment and half myth. The cult's experiments had birthed her. Controlling her had broken them. If Kageno now held that power. Her communicator buzzed softly, breaking through her thoughts. "Commander, we've breached the perimeter," a male operative reported in a low, tense voice. No signs of hostiles yet. Olivier's eyes narrowed beneath her helmet, the faint display of her visor updating with her squad's positions and vital signs. "Stay sharp," she replied coolly, her grip tightening on the hilt of her blade. "He's here. I know he's here." The team advanced deeper into the ruins, a maze of shattered stone and half-collapsed corridors that clawed upward like skeletal fingers against the night sky. Ancient walls, choked with vines, whispered secrets as the wind swept through them. The air grew colder, laced with a faint metallic tang. Olivier's instincts flared. Something was wrong. The ruins were alive in a way she couldn't explain, an unsettling hum that reverberated through the stone. It was faint but persistent, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. And then there was the sound, distant, mechanical, like gears grinding in the dark. "Hold," Olivier ordered suddenly, raising a fist. The squad froze in unison, weapons raised, their visors scanning the shadows. The faint sound of machinery echoed again, closer this time, a rhythmic thrum that rattled through the floor. Olivier's visor displayed no readings of hostiles, no movement, but that only made her unease deepen. "Kageno," she murmured under her breath. It had to be him. The ruins were old, older than the cult, perhaps, and buried here were remnants of a past long forgotten. Minoru would know how to use such a place to his advantage. "Thermals active," Olivier ordered, and her squad's visors lit with secondary displays, scanning for heat signatures. The machinery grew louder. A flicker of red crossed Olivier's display, just for a moment, gone before she could focus on it. "Something's here," she said, a cold certainty settling over her. "Stay close. Be ready." As the team advanced deeper into the ruins, Olivier's grip on her blade tightened. The unease she had felt earlier coalesced into a single, undeniable thought. "He's waiting for us." And for the first time in years, Olivier allowed herself to admit something dangerous. "I might have underestimated him." The sound of footsteps, measured, deliberate, snapped Minoru back to reality. His breaths came in ragged gasps as he steadied himself, his body trembling, still adjusting to the strange, volatile energy coursing through his veins. Umbra 03 buzzed weakly, its systems flickering, barely holding together after the earlier surge. "Move," Minoru ordered, his voice hoarse but firm. The drone obeyed, hovering beside him, its faint hum an almost comforting presence as they made their way toward the exit. Before Minoru could step through the crumbling doorway, a familiar voice cut through the tension, slicing as sharp as any blade. "Kageno." He turned. Olivier stood at the far end of the corridor, her silhouette framed by the flickering lights of the unstable core chamber. Her sleek new combat suit glistened faintly with glowing circuits, an upgraded marvel courtesy of the cult. The long knife in her hand gleamed coldly, its edge catching the violet light that pulsed from the walls. "You're persistent," Minoru said, his voice tinged with dry amusement, though his muscles tensed. "You've stolen something you don't understand," Olivier replied, her tone like frost, biting and unrelenting. "And you'll die for it." The air between them grew heavy, thick with an unspoken challenge. This place, these ruins, felt alive, the oppressive energy radiating from the core bleeding into the very stones around them. The echoes of Project Epsilon lingered here, a nightmare concealed in shame, its horrors seeping into the air itself. Aurora's presence lingered too, like a whisper on the edge of consciousness. Minoru said nothing, his face shadowed beneath the hood of his jacket. He tightened his grip on his collapsible baton, its metal surface humming faintly as it charged. Umbra 03 hovered silently behind him, tracking Olivier's every movement, its sensors flickering with quiet urgency. They didn't need words. Olivier struck first. She moved like a shadow, her blade flashing in a silver arc that seemed to slice the very air. Minoru twisted, sidestepping the blow with inches to spare. His baton lashed out in a counterattack, aimed precisely for her wrist, but Olivier's reflexes were preternatural. She deflected it with a clang, the collision of metal on metal ringing through the chamber like a bell. Minoru pressed forward, his movements fluid and relentless. The baton was an extension of himself, its strikes deliberate and lightning fast, probing for a weakness. Olivier, however, was a wall of precision and fury, her blade intercepting his every attack, each parry calculated with deadly grace. "You're good," she said, her voice edged with reluctant admiration. "But you're not invincible." Minoru didn't answer. His response came in the form of a sudden surge of power. He activated the baton's energy pulse. The hum intensified as he swung it toward her chest, the crackling force colliding with her suit's shielding. Olivier skidded backward, her boots scraping across the stone, but she recovered quickly, raising her knife in a defensive stance. Around them, the room itself seemed to react to their battle. The unstable core behind Olivier pulsed faster, its energy seeping into the chamber like veins of raw power. The walls trembled, the violet glow deepening, and Minoru felt it, a strange warmth coursing through his veins. His strikes grew sharper, faster, stronger. And yet it wasn't just his body. A presence brushed against the edges of his mind, faint but undeniable. It was her. Aurora. Wordless, yet unmistakably there, an encouragement, a connection he didn't fully understand. Olivier faltered, her precision wavering for the first time. Minoru saw it in her movements, a hesitation, a crack in the cold steel of her resolve. As she parried his attacks, flashes of something alien crossed her mind. A sunlit field, laughter carried on the breeze. A child crying, clutching her chest as a dark figure loomed above. Fragmented memories that didn't belong to her. "What is this?" Olivier murmured, her voice breaking for just a moment, confusion softening her gaze. Minoru didn't hesitate. He feinted left, drawing her attention, then struck hard at her shoulder. The blow connected, sending Olivier staggering, but before he could follow up, her knife lashed upward in desperation, grazing his arm. Pain flared, but it was muted by the energy coursing through him. He glanced down, startled, as the wound closed almost instantly, a faint purple glow lingering around the torn fabric of his jacket. Olivier's eyes narrowed, her voice low and accusatory. You're connected to it? To her? Aurora's chosen you, hasn't she? Minoru didn't answer. He couldn't. Their clash intensified. Olivier's blade became a whirlwind of motion, her strikes honed with deadly precision, fueled by a mix of fury and desperation. Minoru matched her with his enhanced speed and strength, countering every attack with ruthless efficiency. Their battle transcended words, a collision of wills as much as weapons. The chamber trembled around them, cracks splitting the floor and ceiling as arcs of violet lightning shot out from the core. Energy hissed through the air, scorching stone and blasting debris. Umbra 03 hovered nearby, its lights flashing in rapid warning. Minoru caught glimpses of its alerts even in the chaos. Core instability critical. Collapse imminent. Olivier lunged, her blade aimed for his heart. Minoru sidestepped and seized her wrist, twisting it sharply. The knife clattered to the ground, skidding across the stone. For a moment the fight was over. But Olivier wasn't finished. Her free hand struck his side with brutal force, forcing him to release her. She dove for the knife, but Minoru was faster. He activated the batten's hidden EMP pulse, sending a shockwave through the air. Olivier's suit sparked violently, system shutting down momentarily as she fell to the floor. Minoru loomed over her, his baton raised. But as he stared down at her, something in her expression gave him pause. The icy certainty was gone. In its place was confusion, fear even. Her mask had cracked. You don't even know who you are, do you? Minoru said softly, his voice breaking the silence like a distant echo. Olivier's eyes hardened, though her voice wavered. It doesn't matter. My purpose is clear. Yours ends here. Before he could respond, the core screamed, a deafening hum that filled the chamber as a massive crack split the unstable machine. The air warped with the force of energy ready to detonate. Aurora's voice echoed in Minoru's mind, urgent and soft. Run. The core is collapsing. There's no time. Olivier's suit rebooted and she staggered to her feet, knife once again in her hand. She planted herself between Minoru and the exit, her face resolute despite the chaos. I won't let you leave. Minoru's jaw clenched. The seconds ticked down like a countdown to oblivion. With a burst of speed, he feinted toward Olivier, forcing her to react, then darted to the side. The floor cracked beneath his feet, chunks of stone plummeting into the void below. Olivier lunged after him, but the ground collapsed beneath her. She caught herself at the last second, her knife clattering away into the abyss. Minoru didn't look back. He sprinted for the exit as the core screamed louder, its collapse imminent. The ruins trembled, the air igniting with violet energy. Somewhere behind him Olivier's voice rose, whether it was a curse or a plea he didn't know. And then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the collapsing ruins. Minoru exploded out of the ruins, the ground shuddering behind him as the collapsing structure sent shockwaves through the earth. He sprinted into the forest, every muscle in his legs screaming with exhaustion. The enhanced strength from Aurora's energy imprint propelled him forward, his movements almost superhuman, but the cult operatives were relentless. Their shouts echoed in the distance, their pursuit closing in. Then he heard it. Crack. A sniper shot, a razor-sharp sound that split the air. Minoru's wrist interface flashed a bright warning, too late. The bullet struck Umbra 03 squarely in one of its main motors, a burst of sparks spraying like fireworks. No! He shouted as the shot struck Umbra 03 dead center, one of its motors sparking violently. The drone's hum faltered, the whine of its systems turning into a fractured, metallic screech. It spiraled uncontrollably, wobbling midair like a wounded bird before crashing somewhere in the distance, hidden beyond the tree line. Minoru's chest tightened as he heard the impact. Umbra 03, his loyal companion through countless missions, was gone. The operatives behind him erupted into shouts of triumph, their gunfire redoubling as they closed the distance, emboldened by their small victory. Minoru gritted his teeth, forcing the grief and frustration aside. I can't stop. Not now. To hesitate would hand the cult their desperate prize, him. Survive first, mourn later. He pushed harder, adrenaline flooding his veins like wildfire, amplifying his speed. Branches whipped against his face and suit as he tore through the darkened forest, his feet pounding the uneven ground with ruthless precision. The operatives fell further and further behind, their shouts fading into distant echoes. Minoru twisted and weaved as he ran, but the chaos was overwhelming. Bullets punched into tree trunks, splintering bark into the air. His suit absorbed glancing hits, rounds deflecting off the reinforced plating with sharp metallic pings. He felt the impacts, jarring and forceful, but his shadow suit held strong, its adaptive material dispersing the kinetic force. And then it happened. Crack. Another sniper shot. Pain seared through Minoru's side as the round grazed him, slipping past the armor's edge and tearing through the suit's reinforced layers. A sharp, molten heat radiated through his ribs. He staggered mid-sprint, his balance thrown off as his vision momentarily blurred. "Keep moving," his mind screamed, overriding the wave of agony. The sniper's shot had been perfectly timed, just enough to wound him but not kill him outright. His footing faltered as he hit a steep decline at the forest's edge. The world tilted violently and Minoru tumbled forward, his body careening down the slope. Rocks and debris battered him as he rolled, the jolt of each impact amplifying the pain flaring from his side. He barely registered when he crashed through the final line of underbrush and into the outskirts of the city below. Move. Somewhere deep in his battered body, the adrenaline module in his suit activated. A surge of chemical energy flooded his veins, jolting him back into motion like a defibrillator restarting his heart. His muscles burned, his nerves ignited, but he pushed himself upright, ignoring the pain and the faint trickle of blood along his ribs. The operative's shouts were distant now, the forest obscuring their line of sight, but he could still hear the faint echoes of pursuit. He couldn't stop. Stumbling into the shadows of the city's industrial fringe, Minoru forced his legs to keep moving. His enhanced speed carried him across cracked streets and through silent alleyways. The city loomed around him, cold, metallic, and indifferent to his plight, as he darted through darkened construction zones and abandoned lots, each step fueled by sheer will. By the time he reached the outskirts of a construction site near the city's more affluent district, his body betrayed him. The adrenaline boost flickered, its effects fraying under the strain of his injuries and exhaustion. Minoru collapsed against a pile of broken beams, sliding down until his back hit the rubble with a dull thud. His chest heaved, every breath ragged and strained. He looked down at his side where the sniper round had grazed him. The fabric of his suit was torn, a jagged burn trailing along his ribs. The wound wasn't deep, but the searing pain radiated with each movement, and he knew he couldn't push himself any further. Whatever Aurora did to him was still lingering in his system, seemed to simmer beneath his skin, keeping him from slipping into full unconsciousness, but for how long he couldn't say. Minoru collapsed, slumping against the rubble. His chest heaved as he gasped for air, each breath a ragged, wheezing struggle. The energy from Aurora, the raw, alien force still coursing through his veins, seemed to twist and coil inside him, resisting and augmenting his body in equal measure. His vision swam and pain lanced through his muscles, leaving his limbs leaden and unresponsive. Too much. His mind raced even as consciousness faltered. Overdid it. He had pushed his adrenaline module beyond its safe limits. The suit's diagnostics flashed faintly on his wrist display. His system was dangerously close to shock. Whether it was Aurora's doing, the crash from the adrenaline, or the toll of his desperate sprint, he couldn't tell. Am I going to die here? He wondered bitterly. To the cult? To Aurora's power? Or to his own damn recklessness? The edges of his vision darkened. Sounds dulled to a distant hum like he was underwater. He slumped further, his head tilting back against the cold steel beams. His vision blurred. His mind felt heavy. This is it, he thought. This is how it ends. And then, Minoru? A voice, soft and familiar. He blinked, his fading vision sharpening for just a moment. A figure loomed over him, framed by the distant glow of city lights. It took him a heartbeat to recognize her face. Akane Nishino. She was kneeling beside him, her expression torn between relief and fear. Minoru? She whispered, her voice trembling as she reached out, hesitant, as though touching him would confirm her worst fears. Minoru tried to respond, to say anything, but his throat was dry, and the darkness finally dragged him under. The last thing he saw was Akane's face, her eyes wide with desperation. Minoru tried to speak, to answer her, but the words caught in his throat. Darkness clawed at the edges of his mind, pulling him down. And then everything went black. Extra chapter, Aurora's smile. The ruins groaned, the tortured stonework trembling as the aftermath of Aurora's energy transfer reverberated through its foundations. Dust fell in lazy spirals from the fractured ceiling, and the air buzzed with residual heat, thick enough to choke on. Olivier staggered slightly, her Vanguard suit humming as its stabilization systems compensated for the tremors. Even so, the raw, oppressive energy made her sensors flicker in warning, struggling against the instability of the environment. She scanned the shattered chamber, the sharp glow of her visor cutting through the gloom. The pedestal still stood, though barely, its surface cracked and scorched from the eruption of power. The monstrous appendage chained to the chamber, a grotesque marriage of metal and flesh, was now still, its runes fading back to darkness. And the threat. Kageno. He was gone. Olivier's fists tightened at her sides, her chest burning with frustration. The mission was incomplete. He had slipped through her fingers again. Failure churned like acid in her stomach, unfamiliar and intolerable. She forced herself to breathe, her combat instincts keeping her focused even as the anger gnawed at her. Then the whine began. It was faint at first, a high-pitched hum rising through the floor, sharp enough to send a shiver down her spine. The chains binding the monstrous arm began to glow again, but this time in a sickly, pulsating red, their energy fluctuating wildly. The runes etched into the walls lit up in response, blazing like warnings carved into the stone itself. What now? Olivier muttered, irritation bleeding into her otherwise composed voice. Her suit's HUD flared red as alarms cascaded across her interface. Warning, high-yield detonation imminent. Olivier's blood ran cold as the truth dawned on her. The cult's fail-safe protocols. She had seen smaller versions deployed before, but this was orders of magnitude beyond anything she'd encountered. A tactical nuke, she whispered, disbelief mingling with disgust. Her interface flashed a countdown, 7 minutes and 14 seconds. 7 minutes. A voice crackled into her earpiece, brittle and clinical, the unmistakable tones of the Elder Council. Agent Olivier, the voice intoned, devoid of any human warmth, the ruin's integrity has been compromised. You are to evacuate immediately. The failsafe has been activated to protect classified material. Failsafe? Olivier barked, her calm cracking. This is overkill. We're vaporizing everything? Do not question the Council's wisdom, the voice snapped back, sharp as a blade. The power transferred to the threat could destabilize our operations. Ensure no remnants of Aurora remain. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Olivier to seethe in silence. For all their supposed wisdom, the Council was always willing to burn everything to ash, agents, evidence, history, if it served their need for secrecy. She clenched her jaw and turned toward the exit, pulling up a 3D map of the ruins to locate the quickest route out. And then, faint and flickering, the projection returned. Aurora's image stood once more above the pedestal, faint yet eerily stable, her translucent form softly glowing amidst the chaos. Unlike before, she was calm, her posture poised and defiant. The ghostly light etched her features with an unsettling clarity, serene, yet laced with an underlying sorrow that Olivier couldn't ignore. You won't make it, Aurora said softly, her voice unhurried, unbothered by the world collapsing around her. The cult rarely allows its agents to escape from something like this. Olivier halted mid-step, her fingers twitching as she fought the instinct to lash out. Spare me your theatrics, she snapped, her voice cold and clipped. She refocused on her map, recalibrating for escape as the countdown ticked lower. 5 minutes and 48 seconds. Aurora tilted her head slightly, her faint smile tinged with pity. You follow their orders without question, don't you? She said softly. Even when you know they're wrong. My loyalty isn't up for debate, Olivier growled, not turning to look at her. Her suit's servos hissed as she took another step toward the exit. Aurora's eyes, those haunting, luminous eyes, watched her intently. Loyalty? Or fear? She asked. You've seen what they're capable of. What they'll do to you if you falter. The words hung in the air, heavier than the heat of the imminent explosion. Olivier's steps faltered for just a moment, barely perceptible but enough for Aurora to notice. 4 minutes and 26 seconds. Shut up, Olivier hissed through clenched teeth. She forced herself forward, her boots clanging against the stone as her suit projected escape routes. But she couldn't shake the chill worming its way into her mind, coiling around a truth she refused to acknowledge. Aurora's voice followed her, soft yet relentless. Do you ever wonder what it's like to be free? The question stopped Olivier in her tracks. For a brief moment, she turned her head, her visor casting Aurora's flickering projection in a harsh light. The ghostly woman stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable except for the faintest trace of sadness. Freedom? The word echoed in Olivier's mind, hollow and unfamiliar. Freedom was a weakness. It was chaos. It was what the cult eradicated. Her HUD blared again. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Olivier exhaled sharply and turned away. You're just data, she spat, her tone harsher than she'd intended. A fragment of an experiment that should never have existed. Aurora's smile widened faintly as though she'd expected no other answer. Maybe, she replied softly. But you're still listening, aren't you? Olivier ignored her and sprinted toward the exit, her suit's servos powering her through the trembling corridors as the ruins groaned louder. Cracks spread across the stonework and distant bursts of purple energy rippled from the core like dying breaths. But even as Olivier moved, the ghost's words echoed behind her. Do you ever wonder what it's like to be free? The question lingered, refusing to leave her mind. And for the first time in years, Olivier wasn't sure she had an answer. Olivier broke into a run, her suit's thrusters flaring to life with a low hiss as she sprinted through the collapsing corridors. Every step echoed with the ominous groan of stone giving way, the walls splitting like jagged wounds as the cult's failsafe surged toward its cataclysmic conclusion. Chunks of debris crashed down around her, filling the air with dust and sharp, acrid heat. A massive section of the ceiling collapsed in her path. Olivier threw herself forward, her enhanced reflexes and the Vanguard frame servos saving her by a hair's breadth. She landed in a roll, skidding across cracked stone, just as the beam smashed into the ground behind her with a deafening crash. Her HUD was alive with warnings, structural failure imminent, stress levels critical. But Olivier ignored it. She always ignored the noise. Pain lanced through her limbs where the threat's earlier interference had left her suit slightly out of sync, every joint feeling a fraction slower, less responsive. But she pushed harder. Olivier was relentless. She had to be. Her mind raced in tandem with her body. The elders had always been obsessed with Aurora and her power, but even Olivier had underestimated how far they would go to bury the truth. The monstrous appendage, the unstable core, the projection that defied logic. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was desperation. And now, Kageno, the threat, had taken something the council feared enough to level the ruins in fire and fury. The countdown ticked mercilessly on her visor. 2 minutes and 12 seconds. As Olivier neared the exit, the ruins gave one final, shuddering groan. The vibrations rippled through the walls, loosening more debris. Instinctively, she turned back, her visor amplifying the flickering light from the core chamber. And there she was. Aurora's projection had returned, standing once again amidst the chaos. She was framed by the glowing red chains binding the monstrous arm, her faint form shimmering like a mirage. The cracks of the core bled raw, pulsing energy, but Aurora remained still, untouched, her expression serene. Olivier stopped, her chest heaving, a rare moment of hesitation freezing her in place. "You're not running?" she called out, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. Aurora's gaze lifted, meeting Olivier's with something that almost resembled amusement. Her voice, though soft, carried over the crumbling chamber. "There's nowhere for me to go." Her tone held no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance. "I'm a memory now, a fragment of something that shouldn't have existed. But you." Aurora's faint smile returned, tinged with sadness. "You still have a choice." Olivier's grip tightened into a fist. The ruins trembled violently, dust cascading from above as the failsafe roared toward detonation. She turned sharply on her heel, forcing herself to look away. She bolted. Aurora's voice lingered behind her, like a whisper carried on the air. "Do you ever wonder what it's like to be free?" Olivier emerged from the ruins just as the countdown hit 0. Midnight. The world turned white. A blinding flash erupted from behind her, brighter than daylight, the shockwave racing forward like the roar of an unstoppable beast. Olivier's HUD flared with a warning, blast wave incoming, and her suit's shields engaged milliseconds before it struck. She was hurled forward. The ground buckled beneath her as the ruins behind her detonated, a thunderous explosion that tore through the earth with deafening finality. Heat seared the air, and she felt the force of it punch through her shields, forcing her to curl instinctively into a protective roll. When the world stilled, Olivier lay on her back, her suit sparking faintly, its systems overwhelmed but still functional. She gasped for breath, the acrid stench of molten stone and fire burning her throat. Slowly she pushed herself up onto her elbows. The ruins were gone. Where the ancient structure had once stood, there was now only a crater, a deep, smoldering wound in the earth. Molten rock glowed at its center, a pool of liquid fire that writhed like something alive. The jagged edges of the crater smoldered, smoke curling into the night sky like dark fingers. For a fleeting moment Olivier thought she saw her. Aurora's faint image lingered in the inferno, smiling. It was soft, almost kind, as though she had accepted her fate long before the flames came to claim her. And then she was gone, her final smile swallowed by the fire. Olivier staggered to her feet, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her suit systems rebooted sluggishly, relaying fractured diagnostics and temperature warnings. Her earpiece crackled to life. The cold, clinical voice of the Elder Council cut through the haze. Agent Olivier, report. Olivier exhaled slowly, steadying her breath. The ruins are destroyed, she said, her voice as flat and even as ever, betraying nothing. The threat escaped, but the failsafe has eliminated all evidence of Aurora. The response came after a pause, detached and indifferent. Understood. Return to base for debriefing. New directives will follow. The transmission ended with a faint crackle, leaving Olivier alone once more. She turned to look back at the crater. Flames still licked the edges, smoldering embers scattering into the night like dying stars. Her visor displayed the aftermath, no trace of the chained arm, no remnants of Aurora. It was as if none of it had ever existed. But Olivier knew better. The words haunted her still. Do you ever wonder what it's like to be free? Olivier didn't answer. She didn't dare. She turned sharply, the servos of her suit hissing softly as she began her trek back to the cult's nearest outpost. Her movements were mechanical, precise, as if following a script written long ago. But deep within, something was different. The cracks in her loyalty were faint, invisible to the outside world, yet undeniable. Aurora's final smile lingered in her mind like an ember refusing to die. Behind her, the crater glowed softly, the molten earth slowly cooling. Whatever Aurora had been, memory, ghost, or something more, her legacy had burned itself into Olivier's thoughts. And for the first time in years, Olivier felt the weight of a question she could no longer ignore. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share, and donate for more videos.